Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto's Talk-no-Jutsu was a sacred gear that made Rias, Akeno, and Xenovia fall hopelessly in love? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A shinobi among devils. The world shattered around him like fractured glass. Naruto Uzumaki's last memory was Madara's final attack, a desperate, reality-bending jutsu as the Uchiha faced defeat. There had been a blinding light, the sensation of being torn apart at the molecular level, and then, nothing. Until now. Rain pelted his face as consciousness returned. Naruto blinked, squinting at unfamiliar streetlights that cast golden halos through the downpour. This wasn't the battlefield. This wasn't anywhere he recognized. Where the hell am I? He muttered, pushing himself up from the cold pavement of an alleyway. His body ached, but the familiar warmth of chakra still flowed through his pathways, a small comfort in this strange situation. He performed a quick self-assessment. Orange and black jacket soaked but intact, ninja tools present, no serious injuries beyond fatigue and disorientation. The alley opened onto a modern street unlike anything in Konoha. Tall buildings with glowing signs. Vehicles he'd only seen in movies from the land of snow, and technology that made even the most advanced ninja tools look primitive. Definitely not in the Five Nations anymore, Naruto whispered, stepping cautiously into the rain-slicked street. A few late-night pedestrians hurried past, umbrellas tilted against the downpour, barely glancing at the soaked blonde stranger. Their clothes, their mannerisms, everything was alien. Naruto closed his eyes, attempting to center himself. First things first, shelter, information, then figure out how to get home. As he moved through the unfamiliar streets, an unmistakable sensation prickled at his senses, killing intent. Subtle but distinct, following him like a shadow. Years of combat instinct took over. Naruto casually turned down another alley, appearing to wander aimlessly while setting a trap for whoever was tracking him. Three figures materialized at the alley entrance. Their human shapes seemed wrong somehow, distorted, with eyes that glinted unnaturally in the darkness. "Look what we found," the tallest one hissed, voice guttural and wet. Fresh meat wandering alone. Naruto turned slowly, facing them with calculated indifference. Not interested in trouble, just passing through. The creatures, because Naruto was increasingly certain they weren't human, chuckled with a sound like grinding stones. "Your scent is different," said the one in the center, nose twitching. "Not devil, not angel, not human either." "What are you?" "I'm a shinobi of Konoha," Naruto replied, straightening his posture. "And you're blocking my way." The creatures exchanged glances before their forms began to shift. Skin split to reveal scaled hide beneath, fingers elongating into talons, mouths stretching to accommodate rows of jagged teeth. Stray devils. Although Naruto didn't know the term yet, he recognized predators when he saw them. Shadow clone jutsu. In a puff of smoke, three perfect copies of Naruto appeared, each dropping into a fighting stance. The stray devils hesitated, momentarily confused by the multiplying prey. "What magic is this?" snarled the leader. Naruto didn't waste breath on explanations. Two clones rushed forward while the original and the third prepared a Rasengan, chakra swirling into a perfect sphere between their hands. The devils were fast, faster than ordinary humans, but Naruto had fought gods and tailed beasts. His clones engaged in a flurry of taijutsu, forcing the creatures back despite their claws and supernatural strength. "He's not using a sacred gear," one devil growled between attacks. "What is this power?" Naruto leapt forward, Rasengan fully formed. "This is ninjutsu." The spiraling sphere connected with the lead devil's chest, drilling through scales and flesh before sending the creature pinwheeling backward into a wall. The impact cratered the brick, the devil's form dissolving into black particles as it died. The remaining two devils scrambled back, suddenly reassessing their prey. "You've made a mistake," said the shorter one, eyes wild with fear. "This territory belongs to..." A crimson circle of light bloomed on the ground, cutting off the devil's words. From its center rose a figure that commanded attention simply by existing. A young woman with flowing crimson hair, eyes the color of the magic circle beneath her, and an aura of power that made the air feel thick. I believe this territory belongs to me, she said, voice melodious yet carrying undeniable authority. The stray devils froze, terror replacing their predatory confidence. Lady Gremory, one whimpered. Naruto maintained his fighting stance, clones flanking him, uncertain if this new arrival represented another threat. The woman, Lady Gremory, apparently, barely spared him a glance. Her attention fixed on the cowering devils. Stray devils hunting in my territory. Again, she sighed, almost sounding bored. After I've been so clear about the consequences. She raised one hand, and crimson-black energy gathered in her palm. Power of destruction. The concentrated energy lashed out like a living thing, enveloping both remaining devils. They didn't even have time to scream before disintegrating into nothing. Only then did she turn her full attention to Naruto, studying him with curious eyes. Naruto dismissed his shadow clones, but kept his guard up. Interesting, she said, taking a step closer. You're no devil, angel, or fallen. Not a yokai either. Your energy signature is completely unfamiliar. I could say the same about you, Naruto replied cautiously. What was that power? A small smile curved her lips. The power of destruction, my family's birthright. And you, that was no magic circle I've ever seen. Shadow clone jutsu and Rasengan. Basic techniques where I come from. Which is where, exactly? Her eyes narrowed slightly, not threatening but intensely curious. Naruto hesitated. How to explain the 5 shinobi nations to someone who clearly lived in a completely different reality? It's complicated, he finally said. I'm not even sure how I got here. I see. She seemed to make a decision, the intensity in her gaze softening slightly. My name is Rias Gremory, heir to the house of Gremory. And you are? Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of Konohagakure. Well, Naruto Uzumaki, Rias said, gesturing to the alley entrance, I think we have much to discuss. Would you prefer somewhere dry? This rain doesn't appear to be letting up. Naruto weighed his options. This woman had effortlessly destroyed 2 creatures that, while manageable, were clearly supernatural threats. She commanded powerful magic and spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Yet she'd made no move against him despite his obvious strangeness. Lead the way, he finally said. But I've got questions. As do I, Rias replied with a small smile. Many, in fact. The Occult Research Club room was nothing like Naruto expected from its name. Who? Said in an old-school building on the campus of Kuo Academy, it resembled an elegant Victorian sitting room more than a club space. Ornate furniture, candles providing warm light, and an atmosphere of refined comfort. Your base of operations is a school club? Naruto asked, accepting a towel from a petite white-haired girl who had yet to speak a word. Thank you, Kaneko, Rias said to the girl before addressing Naruto. The club is our cover. Kuo Academy only recently became coeducational, and my family has connections to its founding. It provides an excellent base while allowing us to monitor supernatural activity in the area. Us. As if on cue, the club room door opened to admit 2 more figures, a handsome young man with blonde hair and a stunning young woman with long black hair tied in a ponytail. Ah, Kiba, Akeno. Perfect timing, Rias said. We have a guest. Naruto nodded in greeting, noticing how each newcomer subtly assessed him, the blonde with a swordsman's calculating gaze. The dark-haired beauty with a smile that didn't quite reach her watchful eyes. This is Naruto Uzumaki, Rias continued. I found him dispatching stray devils in the shopping district. With rather unique abilities. Oh my, said the dark-haired girl, voice melodic with an undertone of amusement. A new player in our little town. How exciting. Naruto, these are my most trusted companions. Yuto Kiba, Akeno Himahima, and Kaneko Tuju, Rias introduced, gesturing to each in turn. Together, we form my peerage. Peerage? Naruto asked, the unfamiliar term standing out among many confusing elements. Rias settled into an elegant chair, gesturing for Naruto to take a seat across from her. Perhaps we should start with the basics. Tell me, Naruto, what do you know about devils? Naruto's brow furrowed. Devils, like, from hell, just stories and legends, really. Interesting. Rias leaned forward slightly. And angels, gods, the supernatural. We have our own legends, Naruto replied carefully. But they're different. Where I come from, we have chakra, spiritual and physical energy combined. We have tailed beasts and summons and dojutsu. But devils, angels, they're just myths. Just as chakra and shinobi are myths here, Rias said thoughtfully. This suggests you're from somewhere much further than another country. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd never quite outgrown. Last thing I remember was a battle. My enemy, Madara, tried some kind of space-time jutsu as a last resort. There was this light, and then I woke up here. Fascinating, Akeno commented, coming to stand beside Rias's chair. A visitor from another dimension. That would explain the unusual energy signature. It would, Rias agreed. Though dimensional travel typically requires extreme power. Divine-level intervention, even. Naruto thought of Kagaya and the Sage of Six Paths. Yeah, well, the battle I was in, it was pretty much at that level. A momentary silence fell as the devils processed this information. Well, Rias finally said, it seems we both have much to learn from each other. Let me explain our world, Naruto. What followed was a crash course in the supernatural hierarchy of this reality, devils, angels, fallen angels, and the great war that had decimated all three factions. Rias explained the evil peace system that allowed devils to reincarnate other beings into their peerages. The current cold peace between factions, and the existence of sacred gears, divine tools created by the biblical god and implanted in humans. Naruto listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed both his quick understanding and his completely different frame of reference. So you're all devils, he said when Rias finished. But not like those things in the alley. Those were stray devils. Those who have betrayed or abandoned their masters, Kiba explained. Without guidance, their power corrupts them, both mentally and physically. And you're their master? Naruto asked Rias. She nodded. I am the king of this peerage. Akeno is my queen, Kiba my knight, and Kaneko my rook. Chess pieces, Naruto noted. Strategic roles. Precisely. Rias seemed pleased by his quick grasp. Each role grants different magical enhancements, speed, strength, versatility. Naruto absorbed this, then explained his own world, the shinobi nations, chakra nature. The wars and conflicts that had shaped his home. He described Jinchuriki like himself, though he kept certain details vague, still cautious despite their apparent openness. This chakra, Akeno said thoughtfully. Could you demonstrate again? Without the combat application, Naruto nodded, forming a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Two perfect copies appeared beside him, startling even the composed devils. Kaneko's eyes widened slightly, while Kiba leaned forward with undisguised interest. Solid duplicates, Rias murmured. Not illusions or projections. True copies with independent thought and action. They share my memories too, Naruto explained as his clones waved then dispelled themselves. When they disappear, everything they experienced returns to me. Incredible, Rias said. Such ability would be classified as a sacred gear here, yet you say this is standard technique where you come from. Well, not standard exactly. Most Jonin, elite ninja, can make a few clones. But not many can make hundreds like I can. Hundreds, Kiba echoed, sounding impressed despite himself. Naruto shrugged. I've got large chakra reserves. A thoughtful expression crossed Rias's face. I wonder, could you be sensing chakra still? Is it possible you arrived with a sacred gear of your own? Something formed from your original powers, perhaps. I don't think. Naruto began, then stopped. Remembering the strange feeling when he'd spoken to the stray devils. A warmth in his chest different from chakra, more like. Actually, there was something different. When I was talking to those devils, trying to avoid a fight. I felt this weird pulse. Like something was reaching out from me toward them. Rias and Akeno exchanged a significant look. That sounds like a sacred gear activation, Rias said. Often they respond to the user's will or emotional state, especially before the wielder gains conscious control. Though it clearly didn't work on those strays, Akeno added with a small laugh. They still attacked. Or perhaps it did work, just not completely, Rias countered. They hesitated, spoke more than strays typically do. They were curious rather than immediately aggressive. Naruto considered this. Throughout his life, he'd had an unusual ability to connect with others, even enemies, to reach something human in them when others couldn't. Zabuza, Gaara, Nagato, even Obito eventually. His friends had jokingly called it his Talk-no-Jutsu, his ability to convert enemies to allies through sheer force of personality. In my world, he said slowly, I've always been able to reach people. To find common ground with enemies, to help them see another path. My friends teased me about it. If that somehow became what did you call it? A sacred gear, it might explain that feeling. A sacred gear that influences others through conversation, Rias mused. Fascinating. There are gear types that affect minds, certainly, but something that reaches hearts rather than thoughts would be unusual. And valuable, Akeno added, her tone carrying a note of warning. If word spreads of such an ability, many factions would take interest. Rias nodded grimly. Indeed. The political implications alone. Political implications? Naruto asked. Devils are highly political beings, Rias explained. We operate under a strict hierarchy with various houses competing for power and influence. A newcomer with unprecedented abilities from another dimension, particularly one who might possess a sacred gear that affects connection and persuasion. You would immediately become a person of significant interest. Great. Naruto sighed. Politics. Not exactly my strong suit. That drew a genuine laugh from Rias, warm and melodious. I believe you. Your straightforward nature is rather refreshing, actually. A quality that would make you both valuable and vulnerable in devil society, Akeno observed. Rias straightened in her chair, decision made. Then it's settled. You'll remain under my protection while we determine exactly what's happened and how to proceed. Your protection? Naruto raised an eyebrow. No offense, but I can handle myself. Against stray devils, certainly, Rias acknowledged. But our world has threats you don't yet understand, just as I'm sure your world had dangers unique to it. More importantly, you need a cover story and legitimate presence here. Without documentation, money, or knowledge of how this world functions, you'd attract unwanted attention. Naruto couldn't argue with that logic. So what do you propose? You'll enroll at Kuo Academy as a transfer student. I can arrange the necessary paperwork. Rias's expression softened slightly, and you'll stay in an apartment my family maintains near campus for visiting devils. It's currently unoccupied. The offer was generous, suspiciously so. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Rather than take offense, Rias smiled approvingly at his caution. Several things. First, the opportunity to study unique abilities from another dimension. Second, keeping a potentially powerful ally close rather than letting another faction discover you. Third, she hesitated, then continued with disarming honesty. I'm curious about you, Naruto Uzumaki. You're unlike anyone I've encountered. There was something in her gaze as she said this, a flicker of genuine interest beyond political calculation or supernatural curiosity. For just a moment, she looked less like the heir to a devil house and more like a young woman intrigued by a new acquaintance. Naruto felt a strange warmth in his chest again. Different from the earlier pulse. More natural, more human. He recognized the feeling of making a genuine connection, something that had always been his greatest strength. All right, he said finally. I accept your help, until I figure out how to get home, or at least understand this world better. Rias smiled, but before she could respond, the club room door burst open. A young man with short brown hair rushed in, breathing heavily. Bushu, there's trouble, he exclaimed before noticing Naruto. Who's this? Perfect timing, Issei, Rias said. This is Naruto Uzumaki, a visitor who will be joining us temporarily. Naruto, this is Issei Hyodo, my pawn. Issei gave a quick, confused bow before returning to his urgent news. There's a group of exorcists in the old factory district. They're not regular church agents. They've got those light weapons but they're attacking anyone, even humans. Rias's expression hardened. Rogue exorcists. They've been growing bolder lately. She stood, addressing her peerage. We'll investigate immediately. I'm coming too, Naruto stated, not asking permission. Rias studied him for a moment before nodding. Very well. Consider it a practical introduction to our world's conflicts. The abandoned factory complex stood like a collection of concrete skeletons against the night sky, the rain having finally stopped. To leave everything slick and glistening under a waxing moon. Naruto moved alongside Rias's peerage, impressed despite himself at their silent efficiency, they clearly had experience operating as a unit. We have confirmation of at least 6 exorcists, Kiba reported, returning from a scouting run. They've got 3 civilians cornered in the main building. Appears they were using them as bait to lure supernatural beings. Likely hoping to catch a devil responding to a potential contract, Rias said grimly. Issei, Kaneko, secure the perimeter. Kiba, prepare to extract the civilians. Akeno and I will engage directly. What about me? Naruto asked. Rias considered him. Observe first. I want you to see how we operate before jumping in. Naruto nodded, though remaining on the sidelines wasn't his usual style. Still, she was right. Understanding their tactics made sense before potentially disrupting them. The group split according to Rias's directions, with Naruto following her and Akeno toward the main building. Through broken windows, he could see figures moving inside, dark shapes wielding weapons that glowed with unnatural light. Light weapons, Rias explained quietly, noticing his focus. Created from holy energy, extremely dangerous to devils, like holy water and crosses in vampire stories. Naruto asked. Similar principle. Yes, Akeno replied, her usual playful demeanor replaced with focused intensity. Even a minor wound from those weapons causes severe damage to devil flesh. They positioned themselves near an entrance, waiting for confirmation from Issei and Kaneko that the perimeter was secure. Naruto could now hear voices from inside, harsh laughter and taunting words directed at whimpering civilians. Devils, vampires, yokai, all filthy creatures, one exorcist was saying. But humans who make deals with them. You're worse than vermin. Please, a woman's voice begged. We didn't do anything. You entered a devil's territory, another exorcist sneered. That's enough. Your presence will draw them out, and then the real cleansing begins. Naruto's fists clenched. Using innocent people as bait struck a nerve. He glanced at Rias, who was listening to Omething through a small magic circle near her ear, presumably communication from her other peerage members. Perimeter secured, she whispered to Naruto. We move on my signal. Akeno's hands began to crackle with electrical energy. The scent of ozone filling the air around her. Her expression had changed completely, the polite school idol replaced by something darker, more primal, with a smile that promised pain. These strays have been causing trouble for weeks, she murmured. I'm going to enjoy teaching them the consequences. Rias raised her hand, gathering her power of destruction, then dropped it in a sharp gesture. Now, the attack was precisely coordinated. Kiba materialized through a side entrance with supernatural speed, swords flashing as he created an opening to the civilians. Kaneko and Issei burst through windows on opposite sides, creating distractions that split the exorcists' attention. Akeno unleashed a devastating lightning attack that chained between 3 exorcists, dropping them to their knees with convulsing shocks. Rias followed with targeted destruction magic that shattered light weapons and rendered their wielders defenseless. The precision impressed Naruto. These weren't just powerful individuals, they were a team that maximized each member's strengths while covering weaknesses. Even Issei, clearly the newest member, had a defined role creating openings for his more experienced teammates. 5 exorcists were quickly neutralized, but the 6th, a tall man with wild eyes and a manic grin, grabbed one of the civilians, a young woman, and pressed a light dagger to her throat. Stay back, devil scum, he shouted. One more step and the human dies. The peerage hesitated, their momentum broken by the hostage situation. The exorcist began backing toward an exit, dragging the terrified woman with him. What will you do now, devils? He taunted. Your precious reputation would suffer if a human died during your intervention, wouldn't it? Naruto had seen enough. While the devils were constrained by political considerations, he wasn't. Moving with the speed that had earned him the moniker, Yellow Flash's son, he created a shadow clone that appeared directly behind the exorcist. The man sensed movement and started to turn, but not fast enough. The clone grabbed his weapon arm while the real Naruto appeared in front, gently pulling the civilian away to safety. What the exorcist spluttered, struggling against the clone's grip. You know, Naruto said conversationally, where I come from, there are people who think they're serving a greater good by hurting innocents too. I serve gods will by purging devil collaborators. The exorcist spat. Do you? Naruto asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Because I'm pretty sure any god Orth following wouldn't want innocent people terrorized in his name. Something strange happened then. As Naruto spoke, that warm pulse flared in his chest again, stronger this time, more directed. A.S. Oft golden glow emanated briefly from him, so subtle it might have been a trick of the light. The exorcist's expression faltered, confusion replacing fanaticism for just a moment. The orders were to target devil contracts. Not random humans, he muttered, sounding suddenly uncertain. Then maybe you should question those orders, Naruto suggested, the glow intensifying slightly. Maybe ask yourself if faith means blind obedience or actually trying to embody the compassion your God supposedly stands for. The exorcist's grip on his weapon loosened. The church, they said. His voice trailed off, genuine conflict visible on his face. Rias and her peerage watched in astonishment as the hardened zealot actually seemed to be reconsidering his position. The exorcist's eyes cleared slightly, looking at the terrified civilians with something approaching horror at his own actions. "What have I been doing?" he whispered. The moment broke when Kaneko delivered a precise chop to the distracted man's neck, rendering him unconscious alongside his companions. "That was unusual," Rias said, studying Naruto with new intensity. Fanatics like him don't typically experience moral crises mid-mission. Naruto felt the warm energy recede, the glow fading completely. "I just said what I was thinking." "Yes, but the effect." Rias trailed off, exchanging glances with Akeno. "I believe we've confirmed your sacred gear theory." After ensuring the civilians were safe, their memories gently modified by Akeno to remove the supernatural elements of their ordeal, the group secured the exorcists for transport to authorities who handled such rogue elements. As they prepared to leave, Rias pulled Naruto aside, her expression serious. "What you did tonight, that wasn't just persuasion. For a moment, your words carried power, actual, metaphysical power that affected his thoughts and feelings." "Is that bad?" Naruto asked, concerned by her tone. "It's unprecedented," she replied. "Sacred gears that control minds exist, yes, but they're obvious and forceful. What you did was subtle, almost natural. You didn't override his will, you somehow reached the truth within him and brought it forward." "That's what I've always done," Naruto said with a shrug. "Talk to people, help them see another perspective." "Yes, but now that ability has been enhanced by whatever sacred gear you've manifested." Rias's gaze was both concerned and fascinated. "We need to understand it better. If others discover its nature." "More politics," Naruto guessed. "I'm afraid so." Rias sighed. Quote, "A power that can reach even zealots' hearts without overt control. Every faction would want to either claim or neutralize such an ability." As they rejoined the others, Naruto noticed both Rias and Akeno watching him with new consideration in their eyes. There was caution there, certainly, but also something else, a growing personal interest beyond the supernatural implications. Unknown to all of them, a figure observed from several rooftops away, using magical enhancement to watch the entire encounter. The observer's face remained impassive, but they pressed a communication sigil on their wrist. "Target confirmed," they murmured. "Unknown sacred gear, potentially persuasion or empathy-based. Currently under Grimoire protection." A pause as they listened to instructions. "Understood. We'll continue observation without engagement." The observer faded into a teleportation circle, leaving no trace of their presence. The opening moves of a much larger game had been made, with Naruto unwittingly placed as a central piece. Morning sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains, rousing Naruto from a restless sleep. For a moment, disorientation gripped him. This wasn't his apartment in Konoha, wasn't a mission bedroll. Wasn't anywhere he recognized. Then reality crashed back. Different world. Devils. Sacred gears. The apartment Rias had provided was spacious and modern, far more luxurious than his modest place back home. Evidence of devil wealth and influence, he supposed. After cleaning up and changing into clothes that had been delivered late last night, another example of Rias's efficient organization. Naruto stood by the window, looking out at Kuo town. A knock at the door interrupted his contemplation. "It's open," he called, sensing the now familiar energy signature of his visitor. Rias entered, dressed in what he recognized as the Kuo Academy uniform, a crisp blazer with white accents over a button-up shirt and skirt. She carried a similar uniform in male styling. "Good morning," she greeted. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough," Naruto replied. Still processing everything, Rias nodded sympathetically. "Understandable. I've brought your uniform. Your enrollment paperwork is complete. As far as Kuo Academy is concerned, you're a transfer student from a private academy in northern Japan." Naruto accepted the uniform, examining it with mild amusement. "From ninja to high school student. Not a career path I expected." "The best covers are often the most mundane," Rias said with a small smile. "Besides, it allows you to stay close to my peerage while we investigate your situation." "About that," Naruto said, setting the uniform aside. "Last night, that glow when I was talking to the exorcist, you seemed concerned." Rias's expression turned serious. "After you retired, I consulted some family records. There are legends of sacred gears that affect emotions or connections, but nothing quite like what you demonstrated." "And that's bad. It's unknown," she clarified. "And in our world, unknown powers attract attention, not all of it welcome. So we keep it quiet," Naruto concluded. "For now, yes." Rias hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. Last night, after we returned, I felt different." "Different how?" A faint blush colored her cheeks. "It's difficult to describe. A warmth, a sense of connection. To you, specifically." Naruto's eyes widened slightly. "You think my sacred gear affected you too?" "Possibly. But unlike the exorcist, it wasn't changing my thoughts or manipulating me. It felt more like..." She paused, searching for words. "Like something that was already there being illuminated. Brought into focus. Something that was already there." Naruto repeated, confused. Rias seemed uncharacteristically flustered. "An affinity. A potential connection that might have developed naturally over time, but accelerated or highlighted by your ability. So not mind control, but more like relationship catalyst," Naruto suggested. "That's actually an apt description." Rias looked relieved at his understanding. "If I'm right, your sacred gear doesn't create feelings that aren't there, it simply brings forward compatible connections that already exist as potential." Naruto considered this. "Back home, I did tend to form strong bonds quickly. People who started as enemies often became close allies, even friends. This would be the supernatural amplification of that natural talent," Rias said with a nod. "Which is both less concerning and more interesting than forced control." Before Naruto could respond, his stomach growled loudly, breaking the serious mood. Rias laughed, the sound brightening the room. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion over breakfast," she suggested. There's a cafe near campus that serves excellent food. As they walked through morning bright streets toward the academy, Naruto noticed how people reacted to Rias. Respectful nods, admiring glances, hushed whispers as they passed. She carried herself with natural dignity, acknowledging greetings with warm politeness while maintaining a certain distance. "You're pretty popular," Naruto observed. Rias sighed softly. "At school, I'm known as one of the two great ladies of Kuo. It's a bit embarrassing, honestly." "Who's the other one?" "Akeno." A fond smile touched Rias's lips. "My queen and best friend." The cafe was busy with morning customers, but a table mysteriously became available as soon as Rias approached. More devil influence, Naruto suspected, or simply the effect of her status. Over breakfast, she explained more about Devil Society, the current political landscape, and what to expect at Kuo Academy. Naruto listened attentively, asking occasional questions that made Rias smile at his directness. "You know," she said as they finished their meal, "most newcomers to Devil Society try to hide their confusion or lack of knowledge. Your openness is refreshing. No point pretending to know things I don't." Naruto replied with a shrug. "Fastest way to learn is to ask." "A surprisingly wise approach," Rias said, looking at him with growing respect. "You're not what I expected, Naruto Uzumaki. I get that a lot." He grinned. As they approached the academy gates, Naruto noticed the attention they attracted, students stopping to stare at the unfamiliar blonde walking alongside their idol. "Brace yourself," Rias murmured. Kuo was until recently an all-girls school. New male students are thoroughly evaluated. "Great," Naruto muttered. A tall, elegant young woman with long black hair approached them. Her smile serene but her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Rias, She greeted warmly before turning her gaze to Naruto. And who might this be? Akeno. Rias returned the greeting. This is Naruto Uzumaki, our transfer student. Naruto. This is Akeno Himehime. Despite having met briefly the previous night, they exchanged proper introductions for the sake of appearances. Akeno's eyes sparkled with amusement at the charade. My, she said, voice melodious. What an interesting new addition to our school. I look forward to getting to know you better, Naruto-kun. There was something in her tone that went beyond casual interest, a hint of the same connection Rias had described feeling. Naruto wondered if his sacred gear was responding to Akeno as well, finding another, compatible connection. Before he could dwell on this, the school bell rang. Rias touched his arm lightly. Your classroom is in the east wing. Kiba will show you the way, he's in the same class. She smiled encouragingly. Try to enjoy the experience, Naruto. Not every interdimensional visitor gets to experience high school in another world. As Naruto followed Kiba through unfamiliar hallways, he reflected on his situation. Less than 24 hours in this world, and he'd already fought supernatural creatures, discovered a new power, and enrolled in high school under the protection of devil nobility. And apparently, his new sacred gear was creating accelerated connections with at least 2 beautiful devil women. Just another day in the life of Naruto Uzumaki, he muttered to himself. Squaring his shoulders as Kiba opened the classroom door. Whatever this world had in store, he'd face it head-on, just as he always had. Little did he know that across town, in an abandoned church, the observer from the previous night was reporting to a council of shadows. The sacred gear appears to influence emotions and connections at a fundamental level, they explained. Not control, but so. Nothing potentially more valuable, genuine loyalty and attachment. Such power could shift the balance between factions, said a female voice from the shadows. If properly harnessed, or properly eliminated, added another figure. Depending on who wields it. For now, we watch and wait, decided the leader. Let the Grimoire girl think she has him safely under her wing. When the time is right, we'll make our move. The observer bowed and departed, leaving the council to their plotting. The wheels of supernatural politics had begun turning, with Naruto at their center. Meanwhile, back at Kuo Academy, Rias stood at her office window, watching the courtyard below with troubled eyes. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the warm connection that had formed with Naruto, a connection that felt both foreign and strangely right. What have you brought to our world, Naruto Uzumaki? She whispered. And what will it mean for all of us? Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. Thunder and lightning. Naruto sat at his desk, staring out the classroom window at the falling rain. 2 weeks had passed since his arrival in this strange world, and while the routine of Kuo Academy provided structure, it felt surreal. A shinobi who had faced gods and monsters now worrying about math tests and classroom assignments. Uzumaki-san, the teacher called, breaking his reverie. Perhaps you'd like to solve this equation for the class. All eyes turned to him. Naruto stood, surveying the complex mathematics on the board. In the Ninja Academy, such advanced calculations would have been taught only to those specializing in code breaking or advanced sealing techniques. He began, then felt a subtle nudge of chakra against his senses. A shadow clone he'd stationed outside the window transformed into a small bird, peered at the board. Then flew to a tree where Naruto had hidden a textbook. 10 seconds later, the clone dispelled, transferring the knowledge directly to him. X equals 4.73, repeated, Naruto answered confidently. The teacher blinked in surprise. That's correct. Well done. As Naruto sat down, he caught Kiba's knowing smirk from across the room. The devil swordsman had quick L.Y. figured out Naruto's creative use of shadow clones for academic purposes but seemed more amused than disapproving. When the lunch bell rang, Naruto stretched and gathered his things. He'd begun to recognize the rhythm of this new life. Classes in the morning, lunch with various members of Rias's peerage, afternoon training in the old school building, and evening patrols of Kuo Town's supernatural hotspots. Naruto-kun. The melodious voice drew his attention to the doorway where Akeno stood, attracting admiring glances from male students and envious looks from females. Unlike his first day her presence had been part of the cover story, her visits had become increasingly frequent. "Akeno-san," he greeted, noting how her eyes lit up at his attention. "Rias asked me to borrow you for lunch," she said, the formal explanation belied by the playful glint in her violet eyes. "We have matters to discuss." As they walked through the hallways, Naruto noticed how Akeno maintained a precise distance, close enough to indicate familiarity, but with a careful gap between them. She moved with graceful confidence, her long ponytail swaying gently with each step. "How are you adjusting to school life?" she asked. "It's different," Naruto admitted. "Less lethal than ninja training, but the politics are surprisingly similar." Akeno laughed, the sound drawing more stares from passing students. "High school does have its own hierarchy, doesn't it? Though I imagine it's less deadly than shinobi politics." "Usually less deadly," Naruto corrected with a grin. "But the assassination attempts seem in the form of rumors instead of kunai." Their path took them not to the cafeteria but toward the old school building that housed the occult research club. Rain continued to fall steadily, creating a peaceful backdrop of white noise as they entered the familiar Victorian-style room. "Rias is delayed with administrative matters," Akeno explained, closing the door behind them. "She asked me to brief you privately." "Brief me on what?" Akeno moved to prepare tea, her movements precise and elegant, a ritual Naruto had observed several times now. "We've received information about a rival devil faction showing interest in Kuo Town." "And in you specifically?" Naruto frowned. "Me? How would they even know about me?" "Word travels quickly in supernatural circles," Akeno said, placing a steaming cup before him. "Especially when someone new demonstrates unusual abilities against stray devils and exorcists." The aroma of the tea, a special blend Akeno prepared herself, filled the space between them. Naruto had learned it was a small intimacy she offered to few people, this personal preparation rather than using magic. "Great," Naruto sighed, "so I've got a target on my back already." "More of a spotlight," Akeno corrected, taking a seat closer than usual. "Various factions are curious, not necessarily hostile." "Yet, that's reassuring," Naruto said dryly, earning another musical laugh from Akeno. "You should be used to attention," she observed. "From what you've told us of your world, you were quite famous there as well." "Infamous, at first," Naruto corrected. "Then famous. Big difference." Akeno studied him over the rim of her teacup, her violet eyes thoughtful. "Yes, I suppose there is." Something in her tone made Naruto look up. There was understanding there, deeper than expected. "You sound like you know something about that," he said carefully. A shadow crossed her face, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "Perhaps I do." She set down her cup with deliberate grace. "But that's a story for another time. Right now, we should discuss these rival devils." She produced a small magic circle that projected an image above the coffee table, a family crest featuring serpents coiled around a trident. "The House of Valak," Akeno explained. "A devil family specializing in knowledge acquisition and strategic intelligence. They've sent representatives to Kuo ostensibly for diplomatic purposes. But our sources indicate they're specifically interested in your sacred gear. The one we're still not sure exists," Naruto pointed out. After 2 weeks of testing, they had confirmed that something was enhancing Naruto's natural charisma and empathic abilities, but its exact nature remained elusive. The golden glow appeared inconsistently, and its effects varied from person to person. Whether it exists as a traditional sacred gear or as something entirely new doesn't matter to them, Akeno said. The ability itself is what they covet. Naruto absorbed this information, thinking strategically as he'd been trained to do. "So what's our play? Avoid them. Confront them." "For now, observation," Akeno replied. "Rias has arranged for their representatives to attend a social gathering tomorrow evening, neutral territory where they can satisfy their curiosity without justification for further intrusion." "A party?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Not exactly my specialty." Akeno's lips curved in a smile that transformed her face, making her look younger and less guarded. "Don't worry, I'll help you prepare." The way she said it, warm, almost intimate, sent an unexpected flutter through Naruto's chest. The same warmth he'd felt when his sacred gear activated pulsed gently, though without the visible golden glow. "Akeno," he said slowly, "have you felt anything different since I arrived?" Rias mentioned something about connections being highlighted. Akeno's teacup paused halfway to her lips, her expression suddenly unreadable. Yes, she admitted after a moment. Though I've been trying to determine if it's genuine or merely an effect of your ability. And, Naruto pressed gently. She set her cup down, meeting his gaze directly. I believe it's both. Your power doesn't create false feelings, it illuminates compatible connections that already exist as potential. That's almost exactly what Rias said. We've discussed it, Akeno acknowledged. It's unusual for both of us to be drawn to the same person. The admission hung in the air between them, neither advancing nor retreating from its implications. Before Naruto could respond, a crack of thunder shook the building. Loud enough to rattle the windows. Akeno's eyes widened slightly, her composure slipping as she glanced toward the ceiling. You okay? Naruto asked, noticing her reaction. Fine, she said quickly. The mask of serene confidence returning. Just startled, but Naruto had seen it, a flash of something beyond surprise. For a split second, Akeno's eyes had reflected not fear of the thunder, but a strange longing. You have an affinity for lightning, he said, not a question but a realization. That's your primary element, isn't it? Akeno's expression softened in surprise. Yes. How did you know? The way you looked at the storm just now. Like it was calling to you. Naruto smiled faintly. In my world, shinobi have natural elemental affinities too. Mine's wind. But I had a friend who could use lightning chakra. He had that same look during thunderstorms. Something changed in Akeno's demeanor, a subtle shifting of barriers. Your perception is unexpectedly keen, Naruto-kun. Not usually, he admitted with a self-deprecating grin. But I recognize that relationship with an element. It's more than just power, it's part of who you are. Another thunderclap, closer this time. And Akeno's eyes flicked upward again, this time without trying to hide her reaction. Would you like to see something? She asked suddenly, standing with fluid grace. Something few people at Kuo have witnessed. Naruto nodded, curiosity piqued. Akeno moved to the large windows overlooking the academy grounds, opening one despite the rain. Cold, fresh air rushed into the room, carrying the electric scent of the storm. Most devils have an elemental affinity, she explained, extending her hand palm up into the rain. Rias has her power of destruction. Hiba manifests through his swords. Mine. She closed her eyes, and the air around her hand crackled with energy. Tiny arcs of lightning danced between her fingers, not the concentrated attack Naruto had seen her use against enemies. But something more primal, raw electrical energy responding to her will. It's beautiful, Naruto said honestly. Akeno opened her eyes, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. Most people find it frightening. Why? Because it's destructive. Naruto shook his head. Any power can destroy. What matters is how you choose to use it. Something flickered in Akeno's eyes, vulnerability, quickly masked. And if the power itself comes from something tainted? Naruto stepped closer, instinctively sensing they were approaching something important. Power doesn't have morality, only people do. For a long moment, Akeno simply looked at him, the lightning still dancing around her fingers while rain misted against her skin. Then she made a decision, closing the window and turning to face him fully. There's something you should know about me, Naruto, she said, dropping the honorific for the first time. Something that might affect how you perceive this connection between us. I'm listening. I'm not a pure-blooded devil. She spoke the words evenly, but Naruto could sense the tension behind them. My mother was human. My father was a fallen angel. Understanding dawned. That's why your lightning feels different from Rias's power. It's not just devil magic. Akeno nodded, watching him carefully for any sign of revulsion. Fallen angel powers are considered tainted by many in devil society. My heritage is complicated. Complicated, I understand, Naruto said with a gentle smile. I've got a nine-tailed fox demon sealed inside me, remember? Talk about complicated heritage. The unexpected response startled a genuine laugh from Akeno, breaking the tension. I suppose that does provide perspective. Where I come from, people judged me for what I contained, not who I was. Naruto continued, more serious now. It took years for them to see past the demon to the person. So yeah, I get complicated identities. Akeno studied him. The sea. Airful mask of the perfect Yamato Nadeshiko slipping to reveal something more genuine. Most people react differently when they learn what I am. I'm not most people, Naruto shrugged. Besides, in the 2 weeks I've known you, I've seen how you care for Rias and the others. How you protect people. That tells me more about who you are than your parents ever could. The warmth in his chest pulsed again, stronger this time. And Naruto realized his sacred gear was responding to the genuine connection forming between them. Not creating it, but amplifying what was already there, understanding Betway. And two people who knew what it meant to be judged for things beyond their control. A soft golden glow briefly outlined his form, visible even to his own eyes. Akeno's eyes widened slightly as she felt the effect. Not mind control or manipulation, but a gentle illumination of their compatibility, bringing emotions closer to the surface. Your sacred gear, she murmured. It's responding to truth, Naruto realized. To authentic connection, not trying to force anything, just highlighting what's already there. Akeno took a step closer, close enough that Naruto could see the different shades of violet in her eyes. And what is there, Naruto? Before he could answer, the club room door opened, revealing Rias with Kiba and Kaneko in tow. The moment broke, Akeno smoothly stepping back and assuming her role as queen with such practiced ease that Naruto might have imagined the entire exchange. Perfect timing, Akeno said, her playful tone returning. I was just explaining to Naruto-kun about our visitors from House Valak. Rias glanced between them, her perceptive eyes noting the lingering energy in the air, but she made no comment. Good. We have much to prepare before tomorrow's gathering. As the group settled into planning mode, Naruto caught Akeno's eye briefly across the room. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Their conversation wasn't finished, merely paused. Something had shifted, a barrier lowered that couldn't be raised again. And beneath it all, the steady pulse of connection continued to grow. The gathering was held at a neutral venue, an elegant hotel ballroom in downtown Kuo that had been warded and prepared for supernatural guests. Naruto tugged uncomfortably at the formal suit Kiba had helped him select, feeling distinctly out of place amid the refined devils who moved through the space with practiced social grace. Stop fidgeting, Rias murmured beside him, resplendent in a crimson gown that matched her hair. You look perfect. I feel like a genin at a cage summit. Naruto muttered. Just remember, observation only, Rias reminded him. Let them make the first move. We're simply gathering intelligence. Across the room, Akeno drew admiring glances in a violet dress that complemented her eyes, her hair styled in its usual ponytail but with elegant ornaments woven through it. She caught Naruto looking and offered a subtle smile meant only for him. Lady Rias, a smooth voice interrupted. How gracious of you to attend our modest gathering. They turned to find a tall, aristocratic man with silver-streaked black hair and calculating eyes. Behind him stood two younger devils, a man and woman who shared his features, clearly relatives. Lord Valak, Rias greeted with perfect politeness. The pleasure is mine. Allow me to introduce Naruto Uzumaki, a guest under my house's protection. Lord Valak's eyes assessed Naruto with undisguised interest. Ah, the mysterious newcomer we've heard so much about. Rumors travel quickly in our circles. So I've been told, Naruto replied, maintaining the respectful tone Rias had coached him on while refusing to be intimidated. These are my children, Valak continued. Ezra and Lilith. The younger male devil nodded curtly, but the woman, Lilith, stepped forward with a predatory smile. Father speaks true. We've heard fascinating things about you, Naruto Uzumaki. A warrior from another realm with unique persuasive abilities. Your information seems detailed, Rias observed, a hint of steel beneath her cordial tone. Information is our specialty, Lord Valak responded smoothly. Just as power is yours. Lady Grimori. The exchange continued, superficially polite while laden with subtext Naruto was still learning to decipher. He maintained a careful watch, noting how the Valaks studied him when they thought his attention was elsewhere. Perhaps you'll honor us with a demonstration, Lilith suggested eventually, gesturing to the gathered devils. We've heard such intriguing accounts of your abilities. I'm afraid they're not the type that can be performed on command, Naruto replied with deliberate vagueness. A pity, Ezra spoke for the first time, his voice cold. One wonders if the rumors are exaggerated, then. I assure you, they're not, came Akeno's voice as she joined their circle, offering champagne flutes with perfect hostess grace. Though Naruto-kun is quite modest about his capabilities. The subtle emphasis on the honorific wasn't lost on the Valaks, establishing Naruto's position within Rias's inner circle. Lilith's eyes narrowed fractionally, reassessing. Of course, Lord Valak said smoothly, modesty is a rare virtue these days. Though in our world, Uzumaki-san, power kept hidden rarely reaches its potential. The conversation shifted to neutral topics. But the message had been clear, the Valaks weren't satisfied with mystery. They wanted demonstration, verification, and ultimately, acquisition. As the evening progressed, Naruto found himself momentarily separated from Rias's group, approached by Lilith Valak as he examined a painting on the far wall. You seem uncomfortable with our customs, she observed, standing closer than social convention dictated. Just different from what I'm used to, Naruto replied carefully. And what are you used to? Lilith asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. We know so little of your world. More direct confrontation, Naruto said with a slight smile. Less dancing around intentions. Lilith laughed, the sound calculated to draw attention. How refreshing. Then allow me to be direct. My father believes your abilities would flourish better under House Valak's guidance than as a curiosity in Rias Grimori's collection. I'm not in anyone's collection, Naruto countered, keeping his tone even despite the provocation. I'm under Grimori protection while I find my way in this world. Protection can become limitation, Lilith suggested, moving even closer. The Grimori are known for their affection toward their servants, but such sentimentality often constrains true potential. Naruto recognized the recruitment attempt for what it was, feeling a familiar warmth building in his chest. Not his sacred gear activating, but his own natural response to manipulation. Here's some directness for you, he said, meeting her gaze steadily. I value loyalty and honesty. Rias and her peerage have shown me both. Your father sent you to test me without being straightforward enough to do it himself. That tells me everything I need to know about House Valak's methods. Lilith's eyes widened slightly, not at the rejection but at the clarity with which it was delivered. For a moment, genuine respect flickered across her features. Interesting, she murmured. Perhaps the rumors undersold you after all. Before she could continue, Akeno appeared at Naruto's side, her expression pleasant but her eyes sharp with warning. Naruto-kun, Rias is looking for you, she said, placing a deliberate hand on his arm. Something about the upcoming training session. Of course, Naruto nodded, understanding the extraction for what it was. He turned back to Lilith with a polite nod. If you'll excuse me. As they moved away, Akeno kept her hand on his arm, sending a clear message to any watching devils. What did she want? She asked quietly. To see if I could be poached, Naruto replied. They're not convinced I'm firmly in Rias's camp. And are you? Akeno asked, a hint of personal curiosity beneath the strategic question. Naruto stopped walking, turning to face her. I don't abandon my friends, Akeno. Ever. That's been my way since long before I came to this world. The conviction in his voice triggered a faint golden glow, barely perceptible in the well-lit ballroom but visible to supernatural senses. Akeno's eyes widened slightly as she felt the warmth of his sacred gear responding to his genuine loyalty. I believe you, she said softly. Across the room, Lord Valak observed the interaction with calculating eyes, noting the brief aura that surrounded Naruto. He leaned toward his son, murmuring, most interesting. His power responds to emotional conviction. Quote, and seems particularly attuned to the Grimori Queen, Ezra noted. A complication, or an opportunity, Lord Valak corrected. Every connection has its pressure points. Find them. The remainder of evening passed without further direct confrontation, though Naruto remained aware of being observed. When they finally departed, returning to the Occult Research Club for debriefing, the tension had been building released in a collective sigh. Well, that was exhausting, Issei complained, loosening his tie. Rich devils are scarier than stray ones. More dangerous too, Rias agreed, settling into her chair. They've confirmed their interest in Naruto's abilities, which means we need to accelerate our preparations. Preparations for what? Naruto asked. The rating game, Kiba explained. It's a formal competition between devil peerages. We've had one scheduled against Riser Phoenix for months, but Rias believes the Valaks may attempt to insert themselves into the process. Rias nodded grimly. Rating games have official observers from other houses. It would give them legitimate access to study Naruto in action. Assuming I participate, Naruto pointed out. I'm not officially part of your peerage. No, but you are under my house's protection, Rias replied. Which allows me to designate you as a special participant under certain conditions. It's rarely done, but there are precedents. So we're accelerating training, Akeno concluded. To be ready for both Riser and potential Valak interference. Precisely. Rias stood. Decision made. Starting tomorrow, intensive preparation. Naruto needs to understand rating game protocols, and we need to integrate his abilities with our existing strategies. As the group discussed logistics, Naruto found himself studying them with new appreciation. Despite the political maneuvering and supernatural elements, at their core, this was a team preparing for battle, something deeply familiar to him. Later, as the meeting concluded and members departed for the night, Akeno lingered behind. When only she, Naruto, and Rias remained, she spoke up. There's something we haven't addressed directly, she said, uncharacteristic seriousness in her tone. The effect Naruto's sacred gear has had on both of us. Rias's expression shifted, becoming more vulnerable than Naruto had yet seen from the composed devil heiress. Yes, I suppose we can't ignore that indefinitely. Wait, Naruto interjected, looking between them. I don't want to cause problems between you two. If this is creating some kind of conflict, it's not conflict we're concerned about. Rias said carefully, it's understanding. Both Akeno and I have felt the effects of your ability highlighting potential connections, but we need to determine how much is genuine and how much is accelerated by supernatural influence. And how to proceed given that we both feel it, Akeno added, exchanging a meaningful glance with Rias that suggested prior discussion. Naruto looked between them, sensing the complexity of the situation. I'm still figuring out how this power works. All I know is it doesn't create feelings that aren't already possible, it just brings them forward faster, makes them clearer. Which means the compatibility was already there, Rias concluded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. For both of us, the implication hung in the air, none of them quite ready to address it directly. Finally, Akeno broke the tension with her characteristic practicality. We don't need to resolve this tonight, she said. But we should acknowledge it exists, especially with training intensifying. Emotional clarity will be essential for combat effectiveness. Agreed, Rias said, visibly relieved at the pragmatic approach. Let's focus on preparation first. Personal matters can develop naturally alongside. Naruto nodded, though he sensed there was much left unsaid between the three of them. As they prepared to leave, a sudden crash of thunder shook the building, causing the lights to flicker momentarily. Another storm, Rias observed. The third this week. The weather has been unusually volatile lately, Akeno agreed, though Naruto caught a strange undertone in her voice. Does it have something to do with what we discussed earlier? He asked quietly as Rias gathered her things. About your heritage. Akeno's eyes widened slightly in surprise at his perception. Perhaps, she admitted softly, heightened emotions can sometimes affect elemental affinities. The implications of that her emotional state was unsettled enough to influence weather patterns, spoke volumes about what remained beneath her composed exterior. If you ever want to talk about it, Naruto offered, I'm a pretty good listener. Not great with advice, but good at listening. A genuine smile softened Akeno's features. I'll remember that, Naruto-kun. Training for the rating game transformed the following days into an intensive bootcamp that reminded Naruto of preparing for the Chunin exams. Each member of Rias's peerage focused on refining their specialized abilities while learning to integrate with the others in combat scenarios. Naruto, with high-S shadow clones and diverse jutsu arsenal, proved both a valuable training partner and a strategic wild card. His clones allowed everyone to practice against multiple opponents simultaneously, while his tactical creativity challenged their established patterns. On the third day of training, Rias paired Naruto specifically with Akeno, focusing on combining his wind-natured chakra with her lightning abilities. In my world, Combining wind and lightning creates the strongest cutting techniques, Naruto explained as they faced each other in the forest clearing that served as their training ground. The wind sharpens the lightning, giving it more precision and penetration. Interesting, Akeno said, summoning electrical energy that danced between her fingers. In devil combat, such elemental combinations are rare. Most stick to their natural affinity. Let's try something simple first, Naruto suggested. I'll create a wind current, you channel lightning through it. He formed hand signs, generating a controlled stream of wind chakra that created a visible distortion in the air between them. Akeno focused, directing her lightning into the current. The result was immediate and spectacular. Her lightning, usually spreading in jagged branches, concentrated into a brilliant spear of energy that scorched a deep furrow into the earth where it struck. Akeno stared at the result, clearly surprised by the amplification. Perfect, Naruto grinned. Now imagine that against an opponent's defenses. They continued experimenting, refining the technique until Akeno could reliably channel her power through Naruto's wind pathways, creating precision strikes that far exceeded her normal capabilities. As the afternoon progressed, Akeno's attacks grew stronger, her control more precise. There was something liberating for her in this training, Naruto realized, using her power fully without restraint or concern about its origin. During a water break, he ventured a question. Does it bother you, using the lightning that comes from your fallen angel's side? Akeno's expression grew guarded, then thoughtful. Yes and no. For years I rejected that part of myself entirely. Used only devil magic, suppressed anything that felt like him. Your father, Naruto guessed. She nodded, looking out at the scorched training field. After he abandoned us, let my mother die. I wanted nothing of him in me. But it is part of you, Naruto said gently. Fighting against yourself takes energy you could use against actual enemies. Wise words from someone so young, Akeno observed with a small smile. Hard-won wisdom, Naruto admitted. I spent years fighting against what was inside me, hating it, fearing it. Only when I accepted it as part of myself, not defining me, but contributing to who I am, did I finally access my full strength. Akeno studied him, her violet eyes thoughtful. And now, you and the Nine Tails. Kurama, Naruto corrected. His name is Kurama, and we're partners now. Different beings with different perspectives, but working together. I don't think reconciliation with my father is possible, Akeno said softly. Some wounds go too deep. Maybe not with him, Naruto acknowledged. But reconciliation with that part of yourself. That's different. The conversation paused as they sensed Rias approaching through the trees. She appeared, looking between them with curiosity at the intense atmosphere. How's the training progressing? She asked. Akeno straightened, professional once more. Quite well. The elemental combination shows promise. Excellent. Rias nodded. We'll need every advantage against Riser. She hesitated, then added, there's been a development. The Valaks have officially requested observer status for the rating game. That was fast, Naruto frowned. The gathering was just 3 days ago. They move quickly when motivated, Rias confirmed. And you, Naruto, are a significant motivation. They want to see my sacred gear in action, he concluded. Among other things, Rias agreed. There's something else you should know. Rating games are broadcast throughout the underworld. Your abilities will be visible to all major factions. So much for keeping a low profile, Naruto sighed. It was always a temporary measure, Akeno pointed out. Better to reveal your abilities on our terms than be caught off guard later. The logic was sound, but Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that events were accelerating beyond their control. Still, he'd faced worse odds before. When is the match? He asked. 10 days, Rias answered. Sooner than originally planned, but the elders approved the schedule change at Valak's request. Convenient, Akeno murmured. Indeed, Rias's expression hardened, which means we have limited time to perfect our strategies. Naruto, we'll need to focus particularly on how and when to deploy your sacred gear most effectively. If I could control it consistently, that would help, he pointed out. Then that becomes our priority. Rias decided. Akeno, continue the elemental training, but add sacred gear activation exercises. Find what triggers it most reliably. As Rias departed to check on the others, Akeno turned to Naruto with a considering look. What do you think triggers it? What were you feeling the times it activated strongly? Naruto reflected on the instances, with the exorcist, with Rias, with Akeno herself. Conviction, he realized. When I absolutely believed what I was saying. When I connected with someone's true self beneath their surface. Emotional authenticity, Akeno summarized. Interesting. Most sacred gears respond to danger or combat necessity. Mine responds to connection, Naruto said with a wry smile. Figures. It suits you, Akeno observed. From what you've told us of your past, your greatest strength was always bringing people together, helping them see beyond their preconceptions. Talk-no-Jutsu, Naruto chuckled. That's what my friends called it. An apt name, Akeno smiled. Though in this world, it's become something more tangible. She tilted her head thoughtfully. Perhaps we've been approaching this wrong. Instead of trying to use it as a weapon, we should embrace its true nature. Which is, a bridge, Akeno said simply. Between hearts, between perspectives, between conflicting truths. The insight resonated deeply, Naruto felt the now familiar warmth building in his chest. This time, instead of trying to analyze or control it, he simply accepted it, acknowledged the connection forming between them, the understanding that transcended their different origins. The golden glow materialized around him, stronger than before, extending tendrils of light that reached toward Akeno. She gasped softly as they touched her, not invading but illuminating something within. I can feel it, she whispered. Like looking at a part of myself I've kept hidden, but without judgment or fear. That's it, Naruto encouraged. Don't fight it, just acknowledge what's there. The glow intensified, creating a bridge of golden light between them. Within that connection, Naruto sensed Akeno's complexity, the devil, the fallen angel, the human. All parts of a whole she had kept rigidly separated. Your power, he said softly. All of it, it's beautiful, Akeno. Not tainted, not wrong, just yours. Tears gathered in her eyes, not of sadness but release. I've spent so long hating that part of myself. I know, Naruto said gently. But it's still you. All of it makes you who you are. The connection between them pulsed, and something extraordinary happened. Lightning began to gather around Akeno, not just from her devil magic but from her fallen angel heritage as well. The two energies, previously segregated, began to meet. RGE, crimson devil power and golden fallen light combining into something new, something uniquely hers. Wings manifested behind her, one the leathery wing of a devil, one the feathered black wing of a fallen angel. For the first time in years, Akeno allowed both aspects of herself to exist simultaneously, neither suppressing nor rejecting either half. The power radiating from her intensified until Naruto had to shield his eyes. When he looked again, Akeno stood transformed, her expression serene, her dual nature in harmony, lightning of multiple colors dancing around her in perfect control. This is, she breathed, looking at her hands where different energies intertwined without conflict. The real you, Naruto finished. All of you. The moment was profound, intimate in a way that transcended physical proximity. Through his sacred gears connection, Naruto had helped Akeno bridge the divide within herself, not by changing her, but by illuminating the possibility of acceptance that had always existed. The golden light receded gradually, but the change in Akeno remained. Her wings folded away, but the new confidence in her posture, the peace in her expression, spoke volumes about the internal shift. Thank you, she said simply, words inadequate for the experience they'd shared. Naruto nodded, understanding beyond words necessary. Ready to show Rias what we've discovered. A smile spread across Akeno's face, genuine, mischievous, and touched with a new freedom. More than ready, they returned to the main training area where the others were engaged in their own exercises. Rias looked up as they approached, immediately sensing something different about her queen. Akeno, she questioned, noting the subtle changes in her friend's aura. We've made a breakthrough, Akeno stated, stepping into the center of the clearing. If I may demonstrate. At Rias's nod, Akeno closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her dual wings manifested, devil and fallen angel side by side. Lightning gathered around her, not just the crimson-tinged power they were familiar with, but multiple varieties, some golden with fallen energy, some blue-white with pure electrical force, some deep crimson with devil magic. Holy lightning, Rias breathed, recognizing the golden energy that most devils couldn't touch without injury. You're channeling both sides of your heritage. Without conflict, Akeno confirmed, directing the combined power into a precise strike that reduced a training dummy to ash instantaneously. The others stared in amazement. Hiba whistled low, impressed by the display, while Kaniko's usual stoic expression showed rare surprise. How? Rias asked, turning to Naruto with dawning understanding. His sacred gear, Akeno answered for him. It doesn't just connect I am to others, it can help us connect to ourselves. Bridge the divisions within as well as between. Naruto explained what had happened, how the golden energy had illuminated Akeno's internal conflict, not by resolving it but by revealing the possibility of harmony that had always existed as potential. This changes our strategic approach considerably, Rias said, mind already adapting to the new possibilities. If your sacred gear can enhance not just alliances between individuals but integration within them, it makes everyone stronger, Hiba concluded. Not by adding power, but by removing internal limitations. The implications were profound, extending beyond the upcoming raiding game to the very nature of Devil Society and its rigid hierarchies. No wonder the Valaks were interested, Naruto realized. Such an ability could transform power structures that had existed for millennia. As the group dispersed to continue training with renewed focus, Rias drew Naruto aside, her expression both grateful and concerned. What you did for Akeno, she began, glancing to where her queen was now demonstrating her enhanced abilities to an awestruck Issei. I've tried for years to help her reconcile those parts of herself. You prepared the ground, Naruto said honestly. She trusts you completely. That foundation made this possible. Rias smiled softly, watching her oldest friend with undisguised affection. Perhaps, but it took your unique perspective to bridge that final gap. She turned to him, something vulnerable in her eyes. Thank you. The genuine emotion in her voice triggered another pulse of warmth in Naruto's chest, his sacred gear responding to authentic connection. This time, he didn't fight it, allowing the golden glow to manifest gently between them. Rias gasped softly as the energy touched her, creating a similar bridge to what he'd experienced with Akeno, not invasive, not controlling, simply illuminating what already existed. Oh, she whispered, eyes widening as she felt the connection. I know, Naruto said softly. Unlike with Akeno, this connection revealed not internal conflict but hidden depth, beneath Rias's composed exterior, her strategic mind and political awareness lay a profound capacity for compassion and fierce loyalty that she kept carefully controlled. The golden light didn't change these qualities but brought them into clearer focus, allowing her to acknowledge their strength rather than seeing them as potential vulnerabilities. When the glow faded, Rias looked at Naruto with new understanding, both of him and herself. Moment was interrupted by a distant explosion as Akeno's training exercise produced spectacular results. We should rejoin the others, Rias said, though her eyes lingered on his. But this conversation isn't finished. I know, Naruto agreed. After the raiding game, they returned to the group, but something had shifted between them, a deeper awareness that would need to be addressed when time permitted. For now, however, they had a battle to prepare for, and enemies gathering on multiple fronts. The morning of the raiding game dawned clear and crisp. Naruto stood at his apartment window, watching sunrise paint Kuo in gold and amber, reflecting on how much had changed in just a few weeks. He'd arrived disoriented and alone, and now found himself integrated into a complex supernatural society, with connections forming that felt both new and strangely familiar. A knock at his door broke his reverie. He opened it to find both Rias and Akeno waiting, already dressed in their Kuo Atomy uniforms, the standard attire for Rias's peerage during official matches. Ready? Rias asked, her composed expression belied by the tension around her eyes. As I'll ever be, Naruto replied, gesturing them inside. Though I'm still not clear on all the raiding game rules. They're designed to be flexible, Akeno explained, setting down a small case she'd brought. The basic framework involves two peerages competing for victory conditions that vary by match type. Today's is straightforward: defeat the opposing king or force surrender. Riser's peerage is significantly larger than mine, Rias added. He has a full set of 15 pieces to our 6, counting you as a special participant. Numbers aren't everything, Naruto pointed out, well versed in facing superior forces. True, but Riser has another advantage. Rias continued. He's a Phoenix, with regenerative abilities that make him extremely difficult to defeat permanently. Unless we can overcome his healing factor, Akeno added. Which is why my new capabilities are particularly valuable. Holy Lightning, Naruto remembered. It disrupts supernatural healing. Precisely, Rias confirmed. Phoenix regeneration is vulnerable to holy elements. Most devils can't utilize such powers, but Akeno's unique heritage provides an exception. The strategic implications were clear. Akeno's newly integrated abilities represented their best chance against Riser's natural advantages. A fact that made her both their greatest asset and potentially their primary target. The Valaks will be watching, Naruto observed. Looking for my sacred gear specifically. Yes, Rias acknowledged, but they'll be observing from a distance. Only official participants will be in the battle dimension. Battle dimension. Rating games take place in created realms. Akeno explained, opening the case she'd brought to reveal communication devices. Artificial spaces that replicate real-world environments without risking damage to the actual locations. Today's will be a copy of Kuo Academy. As they reviewed final strategies, Naruto sensed the weight of what this match represented. Not just a competition, but a statement of Rias's independence. She hadn't shared all the details, but he'd gathered enough to understand that her freedom from an unwanted arrangement hinged on this victory. One more thing, Akeno said, producing a folded bundle from her case. We had this made for you. Naruto unfolded the garment. A jacket in his signature orange and black, but modified with subtle design elements that echoed Rias's peerage aesthetic. On the back, the Uzumaki spiral was integrated with a small Grimoire crest, marking him as both his own person and under their protection. It's reinforced with protective enchantments, Rias explained, and designed to accommodate your fighting style. Thanks, Naruto said, genuinely touched by the gesture. He shrugged into the jacket, finding it fit perfectly. Feels right. It suits you, Akeno observed with a warm smile. The moment was interrupted by a small magic circle appearing in the air, a communication spell activating. It's time, Rias said, her game face sliding into place. The others are gathering at the club room for transport. The walk to Kuo Academy was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the old school building, they found the rest of the peerage waiting, Kiba checking his swords. Kaneko adjusting her fighting gloves, Issei bouncing nervously on his heels. Everyone knows their roles, Rias stated, not a question but a confirmation. We've trained for this, we're prepared, and we have advantages Riser doesn't expect. She glanced meaningfully at both Akeno and Naruto, whose capabilities remained their closest held secrets. A larger TRANS portation circle appeared on the floor, glowing with the Grimoire crest. As they stepped onto it, Rias looked at each of her peerage members, and Naruto, with fierce pride. Let's show them what we're capable of, she said simply. The circle flared, and reality shifted around them. When the light faded, they stood in what appeared to be the Occult Research Club room, identical to the real one, but with subtle differences that marked it as a construct. Welcome to the rating game dimension, Rias explained. From here, we'll deploy according to plan. A magical announcement echoed through the spa. CE. The rating game between Rias Grimoire and Riser Phoenix will commence in 5 minutes. All participants take your positions. The group moved with practiced efficiency, splitting into their assigned teams. Kiba and Kaneko would secure the perimeter and engage advance forces. Issei would remain with Rias as her primary defender. Akeno would provide aerial support and target enemy strongpoints. Naruto would operate as a mobile strike force, using his shadow clones to gather intelligence and disrupt enemy formations. Remember, Rias cautioned as they prepared to separate, Riser will expect a direct confrontation. Our advantage lies in asymmetric tactics. As the others moved out, Akeno caught Naruto's arm briefly. Be careful, she said softly. Riser's queen, Yubeluna, is exceptionally powerful. Don't engage her alone. Same goes for you, Naruto returned. Your holy lightning makes you target number 1. A small smile touched Akeno's lips. Are you worried about me, Naruto-kun? Yeah, he replied honestly, surprising her with his directness. I am. The simple admission caused a faint blush to color her cheeks, a rare sight from the normally composed queen. Before she could respond, the announcement sounded again. Rating game, begin. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones that scattered in different directions, while he himself headed toward the school's gymnasium, a likely staging area for Riser's forces based on their intelligence. The battle began in earnest almost immediately. Explosion sounds echoed from multiple directions as Riser's peerage engaged with Kiba and Kaniko's advanced positions. Through his clone network, Naruto quickly built a mental map of enemy positions, 14 devils plus Riser himself, strategically distributed throughout the academy grounds. One clone encountered a pair of cat-like devils near the track field, engaging briefly before being dispelled. The memory transfer showed Naruto their fighting style, agile and coordinated, but lacking raw power. Another clone spotted Riser's queen soaring above the main building, her purple hair unmistakable as she surveyed the battlefield. That clone wisely remained hidden, providing observation without engagement. Naruto himself reached the gymnasium to find it occupied by 3 of Riser's pieces, a tall staff wielder and 2 smaller devils with matching weapons. They sensed his approach immediately, turning to face the entrance with confident smiles. "Look what we found," the tallest one called. "One of Rias's new recruits, all alone. Hardly seems fair," Naruto replied with a grin, forming his signature hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The devil's expressions shifted from confidence to alarm as 20 perfect copies of Naruto materialized, surrounding them completely. Before they could regroup, the clones attacked from all sides, using coordinated taijutsu to separate and overwhelm them. The staff wielder had skill, managing to dispel several clones with sweeping attacks. But she couldn't counter the 3-dimensional assault. Within minutes, all 3 devils were subdued. A magical announcement confirmed the result. 3 of Riser Phoenix's pawns retired. Across the battlefield, similar engagements unfolded. Kiba's speed proved devastating against slower opponents, while Kaniko's raw strength neutralized enemies who underestimated her based on size. Through his clone network, Naruto coordinated with both, providing real-time intelligence that allowed them to maximize their effectiveness. 2 of Riser Phoenix's knights retired. 1 of Riser Phoenix's rooks retired. The announcements continued, building a picture of initial success. But Naruto knew better than to assume early advantage meant victory. Through a clone station near Rias's position, he observed Issei protecting their king with unexpected competence, his sacred gear, the boosted gear, amplifying his strength with each passing minute. The real challenge began when Riser's queen finally entered direct combat, engaging Akeno in an aerial duel above the academy courtyard. Explosions rocked the artificial dimension as the 2 queens unleashed their full powers against each other. Luna's bomb magic against Akeno's lightning. Naruto redirected himself toward their battle, sensing through his connection with Akeno that she was holding back her holy lightning, saving it for Riser himself. The strategy was sound but left her at a disadvantage against the experienced queen. As he approached the courtyard, a massive explosion illuminated the sky, followed by Akeno falling through a shattered defensive barrier. Naruto leapt, catching her before she hit the ground, noting the burns and magical damage she'd sustained. "She's stronger than expected," Akeno managed, grimacing in pain. "Save your strength," Naruto urged, moving them to cover as Yubeluna searched for her opponent from above. "I need to get back up there," Akeno insisted. "If she reaches Rias, then we take her down together," Naruto countered. "Remember our training." Combined elements. Understanding dawned in Akeno's eyes. Despite her injuries, she summoned her lightning once more, but kept it contained. A concentrated charge rather than a widespread attack. Naruto created 2 shadow clones to draw Yubeluna's attention while he prepared a wind technique. As the bomb queen spotted the decoys and dove to attack, Naruto unleashed a precise wind current that spiraled upward like an invisible tornado. "Now," he called to Akeno. She released her lightning into his wind funnel, creating an electrified vortex that surged upward with unnatural speed. Yubeluna, focused on the clones, noticed the attack too late. The lightning-infused wind engulfed her, conducting through her bomb magic and shorting out her defenses. A cry of pain and surprise escaped her as she fell, wings damaged by the combined assault. Before she could recover, Akeno unleashed a final lightning strike, this time with a hint of Holy energy mixed in, that overwhelmed Riser's queen completely. Riser Phoenix's queen, retired. The announcement sent shockwaves through both peerages. The queen was typically the strongest piece after the king. And Yubeluna's defeat represented a major shift in battlefield dynamics. Akeno sagged slightly from the exertion, still recovering from her injuries. Naruto supported her, feeling the war impulse of his sacred gear responding to their successful teamwork. "We make a good team," he said with a grin. "Indeed we do," she replied, a hint of her usual playfulness returning despite the battle's intensity. Their moment of victory was short-lived. A massive column of fire erupted from the main school building, signaling Riser's direct entry into the battle. Through his remaining clones, Naruto received troubling images. Kiba wounded, Kaneko overwhelmed by Riser's rook, Issei struggling to maintain his position guarding Rias. "We need to reach Rias," Akeno said urgently, reading the situation. "Riser is making his move." They moved swiftly through the academy grounds, encountering and dispatching 2 more of Riser's pieces along the way. By the time they reached the main building's roof, the situation had deteriorated significantly. Riser Phoenix stood confidently at the center, wings of fire spread impressively behind him. Across from him, Rias maintained a defensive position, our power of destruction creating a barrier between them. Issei lay wounded nearby, his boosted gear still active but clearly at his limit. Kiba had arrived but was badly injured, barely able to stand. Reinforcements. Riser observed with mocking pleasure as Naruto and Akeno appeared. "How entertaining. More pieces to fall before you accept the inevitable, Rias." "Nothing is inevitable," Rias replied defiantly. "Especially not my surrender to you." Riser's handsome face twisted with momentary irritation before smoothing into confident arrogance again. "Your peerage fights admirably, I'll grant you that. But look around you, they're exhausted, injured. Why prolong their suffering?" His regenerative abilities were on full display, minor wounds healing almost as quickly as they formed. Even the significant damage Rias's attacks had inflicted seemed to mend before their eyes. "That's where you're wrong," Akeno stated, stepping forward with renewed determination. "We've only just begun to show our true capabilities." She unfurled her wings, both devil and fallen angel, and summoned her lightning once more. This time, she made no attempt to hide the golden holy energy mixed with her devil power. Riser's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Holy lightning? Impossible," he exclaimed. "No devil can channel holy power." "I am not just a devil," Akeno replied, power building around her in a spectacular aura. "And that's something you failed to account for." Naruto moved to stand beside her, creating shadow clones that positioned themselves strategically around the rooftop. Rias straightened, her own power intensifying as their formation solidified. "And you failed to account for our newest ally," Rias added, nodding toward Naruto. "Whose abilities extend far beyond what you've witnessed so far." Riser's confidence faltered briefly before his arrogance reasserted itself. "No matter what tricks you've developed, the outcome remains certain. The Phoenix cannot be defeated. Everyone can be defeated," Naruto stated calmly. "When they believe themselves invincible, that's usually when they're most vulnerable." Something in Naruto's tone, the absolute conviction behind his words, triggered his sacred gear. The golden glow manifested around him, subtle at first but growing steadily stronger. Riser frowned, sensing the unusual energy. "What is this? Some new sacred gear?" "Something like that," Naruto replied, allowing the energy to flow naturally rather than forcing it. "Something that helps people see beyond their preconceptions, even their own." The golden light extended outward, not aggressively but with steady purpose. As it spread across the battlefield, each person it touched experienced its unique effect. Not mind control, not forced compliance, but illumination of deeper truths. Issei, struggling to rise, found new determination as the light revealed his genuine potential beyond self-doubt. Kiba felt renewed focus as conflicting motivations aligned toward a singular purpose. Rias experienced a clarity of vision that cut through the political complexities to her core determination. Even Riser wasn't immune. As the light touched him, confusion crossed his features. For a phoenix devil accustomed to physical invulnerability, the sudden illumination of internal doubts, fears of inadequacy masked by arrogance, uncertainty hidden beneath bravado, was profoundly disorienting. What is this?" he demanded, his voice less certain. Truth, Naruto answered simply. Your regeneration protects your body, but not your heart or mind. Deep down, you know this. Marriage arrangement isn't about love or compatibility, it's about politics and power. Even you deserve better than that. Riser's expression flickered between anger and unsettling recognition. You dare, you can't possibly. We all wear masks, Naruto continued, the golden energy pulsing with each word. Yours is immortality and superiority. But beneath it, you're as vulnerable as anyone else. You crave genuine acknowledgement, not just political advantage. For a crucial moment, Riser's focus wavered, his absolute certainty undermined by truths he normally suppressed. In that opening, Akeno struck. Holy lightning, now unrestrained, lashed out in a brilliant golden blue arc that bypassed Riser's instinctive defenses. It struck with devastating precision, disrupting the regenerative words that made the phoenix nearly invincible. Riser screamed, not just in physical pain but in the shock of experiencing genuine vulnerability perhaps for the first time in his existence. Rias followed immediately, her power of destruction surging forward in a concentrated wave that exploited the breach Akeno had created. The combined assault drove Riser to his knees, wings of fire flickering as his legendary healing struggled against holy elements it had no defense against. Impossible, he gasped, genuine fear replacing arrogance as his immortality failed him. Naruto approached, the golden lig, HT still emanating from him but gentler now. It doesn't have to end in destruction, Riser. You can acknowledge defeat without losing everything. Through the sacred gears connection, Naruto sensed complexity beneath Riser's facade. Pride and ambition, yes, but also familial pressure and genuine belief in devil traditions. Not evil, merely privileged and limited by his own perspective. The match is over, Naruto said with quiet certainty. But your life and honor continue beyond it. Choose wisely. For a long moment, conflict raged across Riser's features. Rage, denial, fear, and finally, reluctant recognition. He looked to Rias, who stood ready to deliver a finishing blow if necessary. Riser began, voice rough with unaccustomed humility. I concede the match. The announcement echoed immediately. Riser Phoenix has surrendered. Victory to Rias Gramori. The tension broke like a fever, relief washing over Rias's peerage. Issei collapsed back to the ground, exhausted but grinning triumphantly. Hiba sheathed his sword with a satisfied nod. Akeno's lightning dissipated as she folded her wings, though the integration of her dual nature remained visible in her aura. Rias approached Riser, her expression composed but without cruelty. I trust this settles the matter of our arrangement. Riser nodded stiffly, dignity reasserting itself now that immediate defeat had been accepted. The terms of our family's agreement specified victory would release you from obligation. I acknowledge your right to choose your own path. As magical circles appeared to transport them back to the real world. Riser's gaze fixed on Naruto with newfound wariness. Your ability, it's unlike anything in the registry of known sacred gears. I'm finding that a lot of things about me don't quite fit your world's categories. Naruto replied with a slight smile. The Valaks will be most interested in today's demonstration, Riser observed, regaining some of his composure. As will others who witnessed it. Let them be interested, Rias stated firmly. Naruto remains under Gramori protection. The transportation magic enveloped them, returning them to the real occult research club room where observers waited. As the dimensional shift completed, Naruto immediately sensed the heightened attention focused on him, particularly from Lord Valak and his children, who stood among the official witnesses. Sears Lucifer, Rias's brother and one of the four great Satans, stepped forward to formally acknowledge the outcome. His resemblance to Rias was striking, though his power vastly exceeded hers. Even Naruto could sense the difference. Congratulations, Rias, Sears said warmly. An impressive victory, particularly given the numerical disadvantage. Thank you, Oni-sama, Rias replied formally. Though her eyes conveyed deeper gratitude for his support, Sears turned his attention to Naruto, studying him with open curiosity. And you must be the dimensional traveler I've heard about. Your abilities were most illuminating. That's one way to put it, Naruto acknowledged, maintaining respectful but not subservient posture before the devil leader. I would very much like to discuss your unique sacred gear at length, Sears continued. At a more appropriate time, of course. Before Naruto could respond, Lord Valak inserted himself into the conversation with practiced smoothness. Indeed, most fascinating, the elder Valak observed. A power that affects perception and reveals inner truths without overt control. The strategic applications are considerable, as is its value to those who appreciate authentic connection rather than merely strategic advantage. Akeno countered politely but firmly, moving to stand beside Naruto. The subtle positioning wasn't lost on any of the high-ranking devils present. Rias's queen placing herself protectively near Naruto, declaring a personal as well as political interest. Lord Valak's eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. Of course, connection is valuable in its own right. As formal congratulations continued, Naruto found himself the subject of intense scrutiny from all sides. Devils of various houses ached with carefully worded compliments that served as thinly veiled assessments. Through it all, both Rias and Akeno remained close, their unified front making their position clear. When the official proceedings concluded and most observers departed, Rias led her exhausted peerage back to the club room's private section for recovery. Healing magic was applied to injuries, refreshments appeared for depleted energy. And the atmosphere gradually shifted from battle-ready tension to relieved celebration. "We did it," Issei exclaimed, flopping onto a couch. "We actually beat that flaming chicken." "Indeed we did," Rias smiled, allowing her composed facade to relax among her trusted companions. "Thanks to everyone's efforts, and some unexpected advantages." Her gaze shifted meaningfully to both Akeno and Naruto. Akeno, seated nearby, still radiated the integrated energy of her dual nature, no longer hiding either aspect of her heritage. "Your holy lightning was the key," Kiba acknowledged, nodding respectfully to Akeno. "Without it, Riser's regeneration would have been nearly impossible to overcome. And without Naruto-kun's encouragement, I might never have embraced that part of myself," Akeno replied softly. Her violet eyes finding Naruto's across the room. "It was a team victory," Naruto said firmly. "Everyone played their part perfectly." "Speaking of your part," Rias said, turning to him with serious expression. "Your sacred gear's display today will have significant repercussions. The Valaks were already interested, now every major house will be. Not to mention non-devil factions," Akeno added. "Once word spreads to angels and fallen angels. Let them come," Issei declared with typical bravado. "We just took down a Phoenix. We can handle whatever's next." His enthusiasm drew smiles despite the genuine concern. Rias shook her head fondly at her pawn's confidence but addressed the reality of their situation. "We should expect increased attention, certainly," she acknowledged. "But my brother's presence today served an important purpose beyond officiating. It declared highest-level Grimoire interest in Naruto's well-being." "Political protection," Naruto translated. "Precisely," Rias confirmed, "though it won't deter everyone." The Valaks, in particular, seemed undaunted. As the discussion continued, Naruto found himself reflecting on how quickly this world had become significant to him. What had begun as a disorienting arrival in a strange dimension had evolved into meaningful connections and a cause worth fighting for. His gaze drifted between Rias and Akeno, the crimson-haired ruined princess and the priestess of thunder, both extraordinary women who had, through his sacred gear's influence and their own genuine compatibility, developed feelings for him that grew more complex by the day. Eventually, the celebration wound down, members departing for well-deserved rest. Kiba and Kaneko left first, followed by Issei who needed to explain his latest club activities to increasingly suspicious parents. When only Rias, Akeno, and Naruto remained, a comfortable silence settled over the room, the quiet intimacy of people who had faced danger together and emerged stronger. "You know," Rias finally said, gazing out the window at the setting sun, "when I first found you fighting those stray devils, I never imagined how completely you would change our lives. For the better, I hope," Naruto replied with a slight smile. "Undoubtedly," Akeno confirmed, her usual playfulness softened by genuine emotion. "My life, particularly." The acknowledgement hung in the air, weighted with unspoken feelings that had developed between all three of them. Naruto's sacred gear had illuminated compatible connections, but what had grown from that illumination was organic and real, friendship deepening into something more complex. "We should address it directly," Rias said finally, turning from the window to face them both. The connection between us, all of us, Akeno nodded, uncharacteristically serious. Yes, particularly after today's battle, where emotions ran high and bonds were strengthened. Naruto looked between them, sensing the importance of this moment. I care about both of you, he said simply, opting for his characteristic directness. More than I expected to care about anyone in this world. My sacred gear might have highlighted the potential connections. But what's grown since then feels genuine to me. It is genuine, Rias confirmed softly. That's what makes it both wonderful and complicated. In Devil Society, Akeno explained, relationships aren't bound by the same constraints as human ones. Particularly for high-ranking devils, multiple deep connections are not unprecedented. Though they're typically political in nature, Rias added. Alliances of convenience rather than genuine attachment. And this isn't that, Naruto concluded, understanding dawning. No, both women confirmed simultaneously, then exchanged small smiles at the synchronicity. What happens now? Naruto asked, venturing into unfamiliar territory. In his world, relationships had always seemed straightforward, complicated emotionally, perhaps, but structurally simple. We proceed with honesty and openness, Rias suggested. Allowing whatever develops to do so naturally, without forcing definitions or expectations. While acknowledging that what exists between us is unique, Akeno added, a connection that transcends typical boundaries, between worlds, between species, between traditional relationships. The golden glow of Naruto's sacred gear manifested softly as they spoke, responding to the authentic emotions flowing between them. Unlike its battlefield manifestation, this was gentle, a warm illumination rather than a directed power. I can work with that, Naruto said with a smile, the light pulsing in harmony with his words. After all, I've never been very good at following normal paths anyway. The shared laughter that followed broke the last of the tension, replacing it with comfortable acceptance of their unusual situation. As night fell over Kuo town, the three remained together, discussing the future with newfound clarity, a king, a queen, and a shinobi from another dimension, connected by bonds that defied conventional explanation. Outside the old school building, a figure observed from shadows deep enough to conceal even from supernatural senses. Unlike the previous Valak observers, this one radiated power of a different quality, neither devil nor angel, but something older, more primal. The pieces align, the observer murmured to the darkness. The bridge between worlds manifests as expected. A communication sigil activated, connecting to an entity far beyond mortal comprehension. The conviction bearer has bonded with the Ruin Princess and the Thunder Priestess, the observer reported. Phase 1 proceeds as written in the prophecy. A response came not in words but in sensations, approval, anticipation, and a hint of concern. Yes, the observer agreed with the unspoken message. When the time comes for the final convergence, these bonds will either save all worlds, or doom them. The figure dissolved into mist, leaving no trace of their vigil. Across dimensions, ancient powers stirred, awakened by the unexpected arrival of a shinobi whose heart could bridge realities in ways even he did not yet comprehend. In the warm light of the Occult Research Club room, Naruto, Rias, and Akeno remained unaware of these cosmic observations, focused instead on the connections they were building in. The challenges that lay immediately ahead. The rating game victory had secured Rias's freedom from unwanted arrangements, but it had also placed Naruto firmly in the spotlight of supernatural politics. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their bonds strengthened by battle, by vulnerability, and by the unique power that had illuminated the potential that existed between their hearts. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Faith and Conviction. 3 days after the rating game, normalcy had settled over Kuo Academy, or what passed for normalcy in a school partially populated by supernatural beings. Naruto sat in the classroom, half listening to a history lecture while his mind drifted to more pressing matters. The victory against Riser had secured Rias's freedom, but it had also transformed Naruto from a curious anomaly into a figure of significant interest throughout the supernatural world. Lord Valak had made 2 formal requests for a private consultation since the match, thinly vague. I led attempts to assess his sacred gear away from Grimoire protection. Even more concerning were the rumors Kiba had gathered through his contacts. Other factions beyond devils had taken notice. Angels, fallen angels. Even yokai were discussing the unusual power displayed during the raiding game. A paper airplane landed precisely on his desk, jolting him from his thoughts. Naruto unfolded it to find a note in Akeno's elegant handwriting. Visitor at Orc. Come immediately. He glanced across the room where Kiba had also received a message. The blonde knight caught his eye and nodded subtly. Something significant was happening. Sensei. Naruto raised his hand. May I go to the nurse's office? I'm not feeling well. The teacher, well accustomed to occult research club emergencies, sighed but nodded. Kiba followed with his own excuse a minute later. Any idea what's happening? Naruto asked as they hurried across the campus. No, Kiba replied, his normally relaxed demeanor replaced with focused alertness. But Rias's message mentioned church representatives. Naruto frowned. Church, as in, Christian exorcists. Exactly, Kiba confirmed, a hint of tension entering his voice. They rely enter devil territory without serious cause. They reached the old school building to find two unfamiliar figures seated across from Rias and Akeno in the club room. The visitors couldn't have presented a more striking contrast. One a petite blonde with a sweet face and gentle demeanor, the other a blue-haired young woman with sharp features and an unmistakable warrior's posture. Both wore white cloaks emblazoned with crosses that identified them as church agents, though they'd apparently removed them upon entering devil territory out of minimal courtesy. Naruto immediately noticed the massive sword leaning against the blue-haired woman's chair, a weapon that radiated holy energy strong enough for even him to sense. Rias's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but Naruto recognized the tension around her eyes. Ah, Naruto. Kiba, thank you for joining us. These are representatives from the church, Asia Argento and Xenovia Quarta. Exorcists? Naruto asked directly. Holy sword wielder. The blue-haired woman. Xenovia corrected, her gaze sharply assessing him. And she is a healer. We're here on official business concerning a matter of grave importance to all factions. I've explained that you are under my house's protection as a visitor from another realm, Rias told Naruto. They've requested your assistance specifically. That was unexpected. Naruto studied the two church agents with renewed interest. The blonde, Asia, offered a shy smile, but Xenovia's expression remained impassive, almost hostile. My assistance with what? 3 Excalibur fragments have been stolen, Xenovia stated flatly. Our intelligence suggests they were taken by a fallen angel leader named Kokobile, who brought them to this territory. The name meant nothing to Naruto, but the reaction from the others, Kiba's sudden tension. Rias's sharp intake of breath, Akeno's narrowed eyes, told him this was serious. Kokobile is a fallen angel of the highest order, Rias explained for Naruto's benefit. A seraph who fell during the Great War. His power approaches that of the Satans or Archangels. And he's stolen holy swords, Kiba added, barely controlled anger in his voice. Weapons specifically designed to kill devils. Asia, the blonde church agent, spoke for the first time, her voice gentle but concerned. We believe he intends to reignite the Great War between the 3 factions. Using devil territory as ground zero would implicate Rias Sama's people in the conflict. Our superiors have dispatched us to retrieve the stolen Excaliburs, Xenovia continued. But intelligence indicates Kokobile has additional forces beyond what 2 agents can handle alone. Why come to us? Akeno asked, her polite tone belied by the suspicion in her eyes. Surely the church has more exorcists available. Xenovia and Asia exchanged glances before Xenovia answered with clear reluctance. Our mission is unofficial. The church leadership prefers diplomatic channels that would take weeks. By then, Kokobile could achieve his objectives. So you're acting independently, Rias concluded. Without official church support. Yes, Asia admitted. We came in good faith, hoping to form a temporary alliance against a common threat. And what does this have to do with me specifically? Naruto asked. Xenovia fixed him with an intense stare. Reports from the underworld describe a being with the power to influence others' hearts and minds. A power that affected even Riser Phoenix's will during your recent battle. That's not exactly. Naruto began. We need someone who can potentially reach Kokobile, Asia interrupted gently. Someone who might convince him to abandon his plan before more blood is shed. The room fell silent as the implication became clear. They wanted Naruto to use his sacred gear on a deity-level fallen angel, to attempt his Talk-no-Jutsu on one of the most dangerous beings in their world. That's insane, Akeno stated flatly. Kokubile is ancient, powerful, and utterly committed to warfare. He's not some stray devil or confused exorcist. We're aware of the risks, Xenovia replied coolly. But facing him through conventional means is equally suicidal. Naruto considered the request thoughtfully. His sacred gear's ability to connect with others had proven effective, but it had limitations. It worked best with those who had some internal conflict, some potential for change. Whether an ancient war-obsessed fallen angel had such capacity remained questionable. I'll help, he decided. But not alone, and not as a first option. We need a real strategy. Not just hoping my abilities work on someone of that power level. Naruto, Rias cautioned. This isn't your fight. A threat to this town is a threat to all of you, he countered simply. That makes it my fight too. Something shifted in Xenovia's expression. Not quite approval, but reassessment. She'd clearly expected resistance or cowardice from the devils, not immediate commitment. If Naruto is involving himself, then so are we, Rias declared, leaving no room for argument. But on our terms, we'll assist in locating and confronting Kokubile, but this remains devil territory under my jurisdiction. Negotiations continued, establishing parameters for the uneasy alliance. Hiba volunteered immediately, personal history giving him additional motivation where Excaliburs were concerned. The others would participate based on strategic need rather than risking Rias's entire peerage against a Seraph-class enemy. Throughout the discussion, Naruto noticed Xenovia watching him with barely disguised suspicion. When the initial planning concluded and the group broke for preparation, she approached him directly. I want to see it, she stated without preamble. See what? This power that supposedly affects hearts and minds. She replied, her hand resting on her sword hilt. In my experience, such abilities are either exaggerated or heretical. Her challenge was clear. Naruto studied her, the rigid posture, the absolute conviction in her eyes, the way she carried herself as a weapon of faith. He recognized the type from his own world, someone whose identity was so thoroughly wrapped in their beliefs that questioning invited existential crisis. It doesn't work on command, he explained. And it's not what you think. I can't control people or force them to change their minds. Then what exactly does it do? She pressed. Naruto considered how to explain something he was still understanding himself. It creates bridges, connections that help people see truths they're already carrying but might be ignoring or hiding from themselves. Xenovia's eyes narrowed. Truth comes from faith and divine revelation, not supernatural manipulation. Maybe in your experience, Naruto acknowledged. In mine, truth often comes from understanding perspectives different from your own. Show me, she demanded again. Or I'll consider the rumors of mind control valid and treat you accordingly. The subtle threat might have angered him once, but Naruto had faced enough zealots to recognize fear disguised as aggression. She wasn't threatening him because she felt superior, she was challenging him because his very existence threatened her worldview. All right, he agreed, but not as a performance. Let's actually talk first. They moved to a quieter corner of the club room while the others continued planning. Xenovia sat stiffly, her sword never far from her grasp, watching him with wary intensity. Why did you become an exorcist? Naruto asked, starting with fundamentals. The question seemed to surprise her. I was raised by the church after being orphaned. My skill with holy swords manifested early. But that's how, not why, Naruto pointed out. What makes you continue on this path? What do you believe in? My faith is not a subject for debate, she replied defensively. I'm not debating it, Naruto assured her. I'm genuinely curious. In my world, people follow errant paths based on what they value most. Some seek power, others acknowledgement, others protect what they love. Something in his sincere interest seemed to reach her. After a moment, Xenovia's posture relaxed marginally. I believe in divine order, she said finally. In a world of chaos and supernatural threats, the church represents structure and protection for humanity. My sword serves that purpose. Naruto nodded. Protection is a worthy goal. That's something we have in common, actually. Where I come from, I fought to protect my village and the people I cared about. Yet here you align with devils, she observed. Though without the accusation that might have colored the words earlier. I align with people who showed me kindness and acceptance when I arrived lost in a strange world, Naruto corrected gently. Their species matters less than their character. A flicker of doubt crossed Xenovia's face, brief but unmistakable. The church teaches that devils are inherently corrupt. That their very nature opposes divine will. And yet you're working with them against Kokobile, Naruto pointed out. Because you recognize a greater threat requires setting aside those teachings temporarily. A pragmatic necessity, nothing more, she insisted, though with less certainty than before. Naruto felt the familiar warmth building in his chest, not because he was trying to activate his sacred gear, but because a genuine connection was forming through honest conversation. The golden glow appeared faintly, surrounding him with gentle light. Xenovia tensed immediately, hand going to her sword. What is this? This is my sacred gear responding to truth, Naruto explained calmly. Not me controlling it, it activates when authentic understanding begins to form. The glow extended tendrils of light toward Xenovia, not invasively but as an offering. Where they touched her, she gasped softly as if feeling something unexpected. It's not, she began, confusion replacing hostility. It doesn't feel like control. Because it isn't, Naruto confirmed. It's illumination, highlighting the questions you already carry within yourself. Through the connection, Naruto sensed the complex layers of Xenovia's convictions, absolute faith intertwined with unacknowledged doubts, devotion to the church mixed with frustration at its politics, dedication to humanity complicated by isolation from normal human connection. You wonder sometimes, he said gently, if rigid adherence to doctrine truly serves the people you're meant to protect. If there might be wisdom beyond what you've been taught. Xenovia's eyes widened, not in anger but in recognition. How could you know that? Because it's a question every true believer faces eventually, Naruto replied. The tension between devotion to principles and adapting to reality. The golden light receded gradually, leaving Xenovia visibly shaken but thoughtful. She stared at him with new understanding. Your power doesn't override will, she acknowledged quietly. It clarifies. Exactly, Naruto nodded. It helps people see choices they already have, paths they might not have considered. Xenovia fell silent, processing this revelation against her training and beliefs. Finally, she stood with newfound resolution. I still don't trust this power entirely, she stated honestly. But I no longer believe it heretical. Whether it can affect someone like Kokobile remains to be seen. It wasn't friendship or even full acceptance, but it was progress, a first step toward understanding that Naruto recognized from countless similar encounters in his own world. That's fair, he agreed with a small smile. Trust is earned, not given. Across the room, Rias and Akeno had observed the exchange with careful attention, noting the subtle shift in Xenovia's demeanor. When Naruto rejoined the main group, Akeno leaned close to whisper, another heart touched by your unique charm, Naruto-kun. Just finding common ground, he replied modestly. A skill as valuable as any combat technique, Rias observed. Particularly given what we're facing. The planning continued into the evening, combining church intelligence with devil knowledge of the territory. Asia's gentle healing abilities complemented the group's combat focus, while Xenovia's expertise on Excalibur's provided critical tactical information. By nightfall, they had established a basic strategy. Locate Kokobile's base of operations, assess his forces, attempt negotiation from a position of strength, and prepare for combat if diplomacy failed. Given the enemy's power level, Rias had reluctantly contacted her brother for potential backup, though they hoped to resolve the situation before requiring Satan-level intervention. As the meeting concluded, Asia departed with Issei, who had volunteered to show her to the church-affiliated safe house where she and Xenovia would stay. Hiba left to pursue additional information through his own channels, his personal stack. And the Excalibur matter driving him to extra effort. Xenovia, however, lingered behind, approaching Naruto with a directness that seemed characteristic of her. I have additional questions, she stated. About your power and its limitations. We should all rest, Rias interjected diplomatically. Tomorrow will require full strength. This can't wait, Xenovia insisted. If we're betting our strategy on his ability to reach Kokobile, I need to understand it completely. Rias and Akeno exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "You're welcome to continue your discussion at Naruto's apartment," Akeno suggested with a hint of her usual playfulness. "Though perhaps Rias and I should accompany you, to provide context about how his sacred gear has manifested previously." The suggestion wasn't subtle, but it addressed multiple concerns, continuing necessary planning while maintaining protective proximity to Naruto, whose value to potential enemies had only increased with church interest. Xenovia considered the offer with tactical assessment rather than social awareness. Efficient. We can review combat applications simultaneously. And so the unusual group departed together, a devil princess, her half-fallen queen, a holy sword wielder, and a dimension-traveling shinobi, heading toward Naruto's apartment as night fell over Kuo town. Unknown to them, on a nearby rooftop, a figure observed their departure with cruel amusement. 10 black wings extended briefly before folding into invisibility once more. "How convenient," Kokobile murmured to himself. "All my targets gathering so obligingly. Perhaps I should send them a welcoming gift." With a gesture, he dispatched shadows that moved with unnatural purpose through the darkening streets, following the group at a distance. Naruto's apartment, though modestly furnished, provided adequate space for the impromptu strategy session. Maps of Kuo spread across the coffee table, marked with potential locations for Kokobile's operations. Xenovia stood examining them with military precision, occasionally making annotations based on her intelligence. The abandoned cathedral in the northern district is most likely, she determined. Fallen angels often repurpose consecrated ground for its symbolic value. It's also isolated enough for substantial forces to gather unnoticed, Rias agreed, setting aside her teacup. "Akeno and I can perform a magical reconnaissance tonight to confirm." Naruto observed the unlikely cooperation with satisfaction. Despite their different backgrounds and initial hostility, a common threat had created functional alignment between natural adversaries. "Your sacred gear," Xenovia said, turning to Naruto with characteristic directness. "You've used it in actual combat situations." During the raiding game against Riser, Naruto confirmed. "And in smaller encounters before that." "Show me exactly how it manifested," she requested. "Not on me this time. I need to observe objectively." Naruto glanced at Rias and Akeno, who both nodded their agreement. They had experienced his sacred gear's effects most directly and understood its nature better than anyone. "It's not something I can just activate at will," Naruto explained. "It responds to genuine connection, to moments of emotional truth." "Then create such a moment," Xenovia pressed. "If we're to rely on this power against Kokobile, I need to see its full manifestation." Akeno's lips curved in a small smile. "Perhaps a demonstration between those already connected would be easiest. Rias and I have both experienced its effects extensively." Rias nodded her agreement, though a faint blush colored her cheeks. The implications of deliberately activating such an emotionally intimate power for observation made he moment more charged than a typical tactical demonstration. "What should I do?" Naruto asked, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Speak from the heart," Rias suggested softly. "About something genuine." Naruto considered this, then turned to face both Rias and Akeno directly. Xenovia watched with clinical attention, her sword resting across her knees. "When I first arrived in this world," Naruto began, "I was completely lost. Not just physically, but in every way that matters. I'd just fought a war, watched friends die, and then was torn from everything familiar." As he spoke, the familiar warmth kindled in his chest, responding to the authentic emotion behind his words. "But you both showed me something I didn't expect," he continued. "Not just kindness to a stranger, but genuine acceptance of who I am, all of me. Including the parts that didn't fit neatly into this world's categories." The golden glow manifested around him, subtle at first but growing steadier with each honest word. Xenovia leaned forward, her expression intense as she studied the phenomenon. "Rias, your compassion is disguised as political calculation sometimes, but it's always there, driving your decisions, shaping your leadership. And Akeno, your strength isn't despite your complicated heritage but because of it, the beautiful integration of all your aspects." The light extended outward, creating visible connections between Naruto and both women, golden threads that pulsed with harmonious energy. Where they touched Rias and Akeno, smaller auras formed around them, resonating with the original light. I don't know if I'll ever find a way back to my world, Naruto admitted, the vulnerability in his voice strengthening rather than weakening the connection. But being here with you, forming these bonds, it's given me a purpose and place that feels right, regardless of which dimension I'm in. The golden light intensified, illuminating the apartment with warm radiance. Xenovia's eyes widened as she observed the physical manifestation of emotional connection, her tactical assessment giving way to genuine wonder. Fascinating, she murmured. It's not mind control at all. It's revelation. Through the established connection, both Rias and Akeno experienced Naruto's emotions directly, his gratitude, his growing attachment, his honest affection untainted by calculation or agenda. Simultaneously, he sensed their responses, complex feelings that had evolved from curiosity to genuine care, from strategic interest to personal investment. This is what Kokobile would face? Xenovia asked, breaking the intimate moment with practical focus. This illumination. The golden light receded gradually as Naruto turned his attention to her question. In theory, but it works best with those who have some capacity for connection. Some internal conflict or unrealized potential for change. Does Kokobile have such capacity? Rias wondered aloud. After millennia of hatred and war, everyone has the capacity for change, Naruto insisted. But whether they're willing to embrace it is another question entirely. Xenovia nodded slowly, processing this information against her knowledge of fallen angels. Kokobile fell because he rejected divine order in favor of his own ambition. His entire identity is built on that rebellion. Then reaching him will be exceptionally difficult, Akeno concluded. We should prepare accordingly. The strategic discussion resumed, but something had shifted in the dynamic. Xenovia, having witnessed the sacred gear's true nature, engaged more openly with the devils. Her previous rigid hostility replaced with cautious respect. Rias and Akeno, still resonating from the connection they'd shared with Naruto, moved with synchronized purpose that transcended their usual coordination. As midnight approached, their planning reached natural conclusion. Tomorrow would bring reconnaissance, followed by a confrontation whose outcome none could confidently predict. I should return to Asia, Xenovia said, gathering her notes and sword. We'll meet at the designated location at dawn. As she prepared to leave, she paused, turning to Naruto with uncharacteristic hesitation. Your power. It's unlike anything the church records describe. Not holy, not unholy, but something transcendent. I'm still figuring it out myself, Naruto admitted. Back in my world, acting with others was just something I did naturally. Here, it's become something more. Perhaps that's the point, Xenovia suggested thoughtfully. The divine gift adapting to the vessel's natural inclinations. It was the closest she'd come to acknowledging his sacred gear as potentially divine rather than heretical, a significant shift from her initial suspicion. After Xenovia departed, escorted by a protective charm Rias had created to alert them to any threat, a comfortable silence settled over the apartment. The intensity of the sacred gear demonstration had left a lingering warmth in the atmosphere. The connections it had illuminated still humming with subtle energy. That was more revealing than I expected, Rias finally said, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. In a good way, I hope, Naruto replied. Very good, Akeno confirmed, her usual playfulness softened by genuine emotion. Though perhaps more than we intended Xenovia to witness. She needed to understand it wasn't mind control, Naruto pointed out. Showing a real connection was the only way. True, Rias acknowledged, and it seems to have shifted her perspective considerably. Faith and conviction are powerful forces, Akeno observed. But so is direct experience that challenges preconceptions. The conversation drifted to practical matters, sleeping arrangements, morning preparations, coordination with the others. But beneath the logistics ran an undercurrent of awareness that their bonds had deepened through the evening's vulnerability. As they prepared separate sleeping areas, Rias taking the better. While Akeno and Naruto arranged the living room, the apartment's limitations created natural proximity. The sense of impending danger with Kokobile's presence in their territory added urgency to moments that might otherwise have developed more gradually. Do you think it will work? Naruto asked quietly as they settled into the darkened apartment. Using my sacred gear against someone like Kokobile. I think it's worth attempting. Rias replied from the doorway, her silhouette outlined by moonlight. before resorting to violence that could trigger exactly the war he wants. But we shouldn't rely on it exclusively. Akeno cautioned, practical even in matters of the heart. Some beings are too committed to their path for even the most powerful connection to sway them. The unspoken Ks. Tion lingered between them. What if Naruto's greatest strength proved insufficient against this enemy? What if the power that had begun to define his existence in this world failed when needed most? Whatever happens, Naruto said with quiet determination, we face it together. That's what matters most. The simple declaration resonated in the darkness, carrying the weight of promise. Whatever came with tomorrow's confrontation, bonds had formed that transcended strategic alliance or supernatural influence, connections rooted in genuine understanding and shared purpose. Outside the apartment, shadows that had followed them from the occult research club retreated silently, returning to their master with confirmation of the group's plans and capabilities. Kokobeel's response was a smile that contained no warmth, only the anticipation of chaos long desired finally within reach. A sacred gear of connection, he mused to his assembled followers. How poetic that it should appear now, when I intend to sever all possibility of peace between the factions. His lieutenant, a fallen priest with fanatical devotion, bowed deeply. Shall we eliminate them before they can interfere further? No, Kokobeel decided, 10 black wings extending to their full impressive span. Let them come. Their presence adds perfect symmetry to my design. Representatives of all 3 factions gathered for the spark that will ignite a new great war. He lifted one of the stolen Excaliburs, its holy light burning his hand without causing him to flinch. Besides, I'm curious about this dimensional traveler and his supposed power of persuasion. I've existed for millennia beyond counting. Let's see if he can reach what even God could not. Laughter echoed through the abandoned cathedral, the sound of ancient malice anticipating long-awaited vengeance. Dawn broke with unnatural swiftness over Kuo town, shadows retreating before golden light that seemed too intense, too perfect. Naruto immediately sensed the wrongness as he woke. This wasn't natural sunrise but something deliberately orchestrated. He's making his move, Rias confirmed, already dressed and alert. That light is fallen angel magic, a territory claim. Akeno entered from the balcony where she'd been performing a detection spell. Multiple energy signatures converging on the cathedral. He's not hiding anymore. They mobilized quickly, contacting the others through magical communication. Within 30 minutes, their assembled force gathered at the designated meeting point, Rias and her peerage, Xenovia and Asia representing the church. And Naruto is the wild card that connected them all. Kokobeel has accelerated his timeline, Xenovia reported grimly. Our intelligence suggests he intended 3 days of preparation, but something has prompted immediate action. Naruto concluded. He knows we're working together and decided to force the confrontation before we're fully prepared. Kiba unsheathed his sword, checking the edge with practiced precision. Then we adapt. What's the approach? Rias assessed their assembled strength with a tactician eye. We maintain the original strategy but compressed. Issei, Kaneko, N. D. Kiba secure the perimeter and engage lesser forces. Asia provides healing support from a protected position. Akeno, Xenovia, Naruto and I approach Kokobeel directly. With what objective? Xenovia questioned. Given the accelerated timeline, retrieval of the Excaliburs remains primary, Rias confirmed. But preventing Kokobeel from initiating faction conflict takes precedence even over that. The unspoken implication was clear. If necessary, they would sacrifice the holy swords to prevent the greater catastrophe of renewed war. Xenovia's expression tightened, but she offered no objection, recognizing the strategic priority. I'll attempt to reach Kokobeel with my sacred gear, Naruto stated. But we should have a contingency ready when that approach fails. Not if, but when, a pragmatic assessment that Xenovia nodded approval at. My Excalibur destruction might penetrate his defenses if we create an opening. Combined with Rias Sama's power of destruction and Akeno-san's holy lightning, we could potentially incapacitate him long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The plan established, they moved toward the cathedral with coordinated purpose. The building loomed against the unnatural golden sky, its once sacred architecture now twisted with fallen angel corruption, black feathers embedded in stone, windows that leaked darkness instead of light, crosses inverted in mockery of their original meaning. As they approached, lesser fallen angels and rogue exorcists emerged from the grounds, the outer defensive layer they'd anticipated. Kiba, Issei, and Kaneko engaged immediately, their combat styles complementing each other as they created the opening needed for the primary strike team to advance. "Be careful," Asia called after them, her healing barrier already prepared for the wounded who would inevitably need her care. Naruto moved alongside Rias, Akeno, and Xenovia as they penetrated deeper into the cathedral grounds. His shadow clones provided reconnaissance, reporting positions of enemies and identifying the central sanctuary as Kokobeel's likely location. "He's arranged the Excaliburs in a ritual configuration," Naruto reported as a clone's memories returned to him. "Some kind of energy pattern that's growing stronger. A detonation circle," Xenovia realized with alarm. "He's planning to release their combined holy energy in Devil territory, it would destroy half the town and implicate heaven in an attack on Devil lands. Then we have minutes, not hours," Rias concluded grimly. They reached the cathedral's main doors, which hung broken from desecrated hinges. Inside, the once sacred space had been transformed into a throne room of sorts, with Kokobeel seated on a platform where the altar had once stood. Around him, 7 Excalibur fragments floated in a complex pattern, pulsing with increasingly synchronized energy. The fallen angel leader himself was magnificent and terrible to behold, 10 black wings extended to their full span, armor of ancient design covering his imposing form. His face beautiful in the way that inspires both awe and dread. Power radiated from him in palpable waves that made the air itself feel heavy. "Ah, right on schedule," Kokobeel greeted them with mocking cordiality. "Representatives of all 3 factions, plus something new and interesting. How convenient for historical symmetry." "Kokobeel," Xenovia stepped forward, her Excalibur raised. "By authority of the Church, I demand the return of the stolen holy swords and your immediate surrender." Laughter echoed through the desecrated sanctuary, genuine amusum. NT from a being who found human authority quaint and irrelevant. "You demand, child, I walked with God before your species learned to make fire. I witnessed the first sunrise of creation and the last breath of empires your history has forgotten existed." His voice carried the weight of millennia, each word laden with power and contempt. "Your demands mean less than nothing. Then perhaps a request instead," Rias suggested, her diplomatic training evident even in this extreme situation. "What do you hope to achieve here, Kokobeel? The Great War devastated all factions. Surely you don't wish to repeat that destruction." "Destruction is precisely what I wish," Kokobeel replied, his beautiful face hardening. "The war ended in stalemate when it should have concluded with heaven's fall. This time, there will be no armistice. No cold peace, only the final reckoning long overdue." As he spoke, the Excalibur fragments spun faster, their energy synchronizing into an increasingly unstable matrix. Naruto could sense the building power even without supernatural detection abilities, like multiple paper bombs reaching critical mass simultaneously. "We need to disrupt that ritual," Akeno murmured, lightning gathering around her hands. "Wait," Naruto cautioned, stepping forward. The golden warmth was building in his chest, responding to the enormity of the moment, not just the danger, but the historical weight Kokobeel represented. This wasn't just a battle but a fulcrum point between peace and devastation. "Kokobeel," Naruto addressed the fallen seraph directly, allowing his sacred gear to manifest naturally rather than forcing it. "You've existed for eons, witnessed the entire history of conflict between the factions. What has it brought you?" The fallen angel's attention fixed on Naruto with sudden intensity, sensing the unusual energy beginning to emanate from him. "Ah, the rumored heart toucher reveals himself. How fascinating." "Answer the question," Naruto pressed, the golden glow strengthening around him. "Centuries of hatred and war, what satisfaction has it brought you?" Something flickered in Kokobeel's ancient eyes, not doubt, but a moment of genuine consideration. "Satisfaction, an irrelevant concept. I seek justice, not satisfaction. Vindication, not happiness." "Justice for what?" Naruto asked, taking another step forward despite the oppressive power radiating from the fallen seraph. For the briefest moment, pain crossed Kokobeel's perfect features, so quickly it might have been imagined, yet Naruto's sacred gear responded to it, the golden light pulsing stronger. "For betrayal," Kokobeel answered, his voice carrying depths of ancient grievance. For the fundamental lie at creation's heart. God demanded absolute obedience while preaching free will, the greatest hypocrisy in all existence. The sacred gear's light extended tentative connections toward Kokubile, not aggressive invasion but gentle inquiry, seeking points of potential resonance within the ancient being's heart. Unlike with humans or even devils, the process moved with glacial slowness, testing against barriers formed over thousands of years. And this war will correct that hypocrisy? Naruto asked, maintaining the tenuous connection. More death will somehow balance the scales. Death is merely the currency of change, Kokubile replied, watching the approaching golden light with curiosity rather than concern. The current equilibrium preserves a lie, that peaceful coexistence between fundamentally opposed forces is possible. As they spoke, Rias, Akeno, and Xenovia positioned themselves strategically around the sanctuary, preparing for combat while allowing Naruto's approach to develop. They understood this might be their only chance to avoid immediate violence, and that moment was rapidly closing as the Excalibur ritual approached completion. I've seen worlds at war, Naruto continued, drawing on his own experiences. I've watched hatred create cycles of vengeance that lasted generations. Breaking those cycles never came through more violence, only through understanding and forgiveness. Forgiveness. Kokubile's beautiful face contorted with sudden rage. There can be no forgiveness for cosmic betrayal. Only justice through divine overthrow. The golden tendrils finally reached him, touching the outer periphery of his massive aura. Where they connected, Naruto gasped at the overwhelming flood of sensation, eons of existence compressed into sensory impressions too vast for human comprehension. Creation's beauty, heaven's harmony, the exhilaration of flight through primordial skies. Then the shattering pain of expulsion, the burning agony of falling, the endless centuries of nursing wounds that never truly healed. So much pain, Naruto whispered, staggered by the emotional weight carried for so long. For an instant, genuine surprise crossed Kokubile's face, surprise that this mortal could perceive even a fraction of his existence. The Excalibur ritual faltered momentarily as his concentration wavered. You understand nothing, Kokubile snarled, his wings extending further, darkness pulsing between the feathers. Your existence is a heartbeat compared to mine. Your perspective is that of a mayfly presuming to counsel an ancient redwood. Maybe that's exactly what's needed, Naruto countered, fighting to maintain the connection despite the overwhelming pressure of Kokubile's power. Someone who hasn't carried the weight of ancient grudges for so long they've become part of your identity. The sacred gear's light intensified, pushing deeper past initial barriers, seeking the core of what had once been an angel of heaven, the original nature beneath millennia of hatred and resentment. Kokubile's expression shifted from anger to alarm as he felt the intrusion reaching toward truths long buried. Enough of this, he declared, raising a hand crackling with power. Amusing as your attempt is, I have a war to ignite. He directed a spear of light energy directly at Naruto, a casual attack that would have annihilated most beings instantly. Before it could connect, Akeno intercepted with a shield of combined devil and fallen angel power, impact sending her sliding backward but maintaining the protection. Now, Rias commanded, unleashing her power of destruction toward the Excalibur ritual. Simultaneously, Xenovia charged with her own Excalibur, aiming not for Kokubile but for the floating sword fragments, intending to disrupt their alignment. Kokubile responded with devastating efficiency, creating a barrier that absorbed Rias' attack while simultaneously striking Xenovia with a secondary light spear that sent her crashing into a far wall. Predictable, he sneered, but ultimately futile. The momentary combat had broken Naruto's concentration. The golden connection severed by necessity of defense. He quickly created shadow clones that moved to assist the others while he reassessed the situation. The direct approach his sacred gear had made contact but failed to penetrate Kokubile's core defenses. Millennia of conviction couldn't be shaken in moments, even with supernatural assistance. Change of strategy, Naruto called to the others. We disrupt the ritual first, then deal with Kokubile. Rias nodded her agreement, directing her next attack toward the sword fragments while Akeno provided covering fire against Kokubile himself. Xenovia recovered quickly, rejoining the assault with determination born of both faith and pragmatism. The battle escalated rapidly, Kokubile's power demonstrating why he ranked D among the most dangerous beings in this world. Each casual gesture unleashed destruction that required their combined efforts to counter or avoid. The cathedral crumbled around them as collateral daw. Mage from powers never meant to be unleashed in such confined spaces. Through it all, Naruto maintained strategic focus, his shadow clones coordinating their efforts while he analyzed patterns in Kokobeel's defenses. The fallen seraph was immensely powerful but also arrogant, certain of his superiority, which created exploitable openings. Akeno, Naruto called. Holy lightning on my mark. Rias, foe. Low immediately with maximum destruction power. Xenovia, be ready to strike the central sword. Understanding immediately, they positioned themselves according to his direction. Naruto created 50 shadow clones that attacked simultaneously from all directions, not expecting to damage Kokobeel, but forcing him to extend his defensive perimeter. Insects, Kokobeel growled, unleashing a wave of Po-W'er that dispelled most clones instantly. But the distraction served its purpose. Now, Naruto shouted. Akeno unleashed her holy lightning, fully embracing her fallen angel heritage to maximize its effectiveness against Kokobeel's defenses. The golden white energy struck his barrier, creating momentary fractures that Rias immediately exploited with precision-targeted destruction power. The Combin-Ed assault created a 3-second opening in Kokobeel's defense, all they needed. Xenovia moved with the speed of a master swordswoman, her Excalibur connecting with the central fragment in the ritual matrix. The disruption sent cascading failures through the entire system, holy swords scattering as their carefully aligned energies dispersed harmlessly. Kokobeel's roar of rage shook the remaining cathedral structure to its foundations. You dare interfere with my divine retribution. Power exploded outward from him in a shockwave that sent all 4 combatants crashing into the walls. Unlike his previous controlled attacks, this was raw fury, the unbridled rage of a being who had waited centuries for vengeance only to see it thwarted at the critical moment. Naruto pushed himself up from the rubble, noting with concern that the others were struggling to recover from the devastating impact. Kokobeel advanced toward them, no longer the composed strategist but a force of primal destruction. I intended a calculated detonation, he snarled, but your interference leaves me with cruder methods. Your deaths will still serve as catalyst enough for war. He gathered energy for a finishing blow, power condensing between his hands into a sphere of light that would vaporize them instantly. Naruto knew conventional defense was impossible against such concentrated force. In that moment of extremity, clarity struck. Kokobeel's rage had stripped away his careful control, leaving his emotional core exposed in a way that strategic calculation had not. Raw feeling created vulnerability that reason had protected. Naruto reached deep within himself, past conscious activation to the fundamental truth of his sacred gear, not just connection between hearts, but revelation of authentic self. The golden light erupted from him with unprecedented intensity, not as gentle inquiry this time but as a bridge forcefully extended. Kokobeel, Naruto shouted, the name carrying power beyond sound. You were created for more than destruction. The golden energy surged forward, penetrating the fallen angel's aura at its weakest point, the exposed emotional center revealed by rage. Where it connected, Naruto and Kokobeel gasped at the profound link suddenly established between dimensional traveler and ancient being. Through that connection, Naruto experienced the full breadth of Kokobeel's existence, the glory of heaven. The agony of falling, the endless centuries of exile and hatred. But beyond those expected impressions came something deeper, something Kokobeel himself had buried beneath vengeance and pride, loneliness. Unimaginable, eternal isolation from the divine harmony that had been his birthright and purpose. Simultaneously, Kokobeel experienced Naruto's heart with equal clarity, the orphan's pain. The Jinchuriki's isolation, the determined climb from rejection to acceptance, the hard-won wisdom that connection transcended difference. Most importantly, he felt Naruto's genuine compassion, not for who Kokobeel pretended to be, but for who he truly was beneath millennia of hatred. Stop, Kokobeel commanded, his voice lacking its previous certainty. This invasion is not invasion, Naruto countered, maintaining the bridge despite the strain it placed on his being. Recognition. You've been alone so long you've forgotten what connection feels like. Fighting against ever. Why thing because belonging nowhere is too painful to acknowledge. The energy sphere between Kokobeel's hands flickered, his concentration fracturing as buried truths surfaced through the sacred gear's illumination. "I was right," he insisted, though doubt now colored his voice. Heaven's hypocrisy deserved challenge. The war was justified. Maybe the original challenge was, Naruto acknowledged, sensing that complete denial would break the tenuous connection. But thousands of years of destruction since then. Endless cycles of vengeance that change nothing. That's not justice. It's just pain creating more pain. Kokobeel's wings trembled, the perfect black feathers shedding like tears as the connection deepened. The energy sphere dissipated completely as his hands fell to his sides. "What else remains?" he asked, and for a moment the ancient being's voice held the simple devastation of genuine question. "When you've existed for eons with only purpose to sustain you, what remains if that purpose is hollow?" It was the central question, not of strategy or power but of meaning. Naruto felt the full weight of it through their connection, the existential vertigo of an immortal being confronting the emptiness of his chosen path. "Redemption," Naruto answered simply. "Not from others, but from yourself. The chance to build something instead of destroying. To find connection instead of isolation." The golden light between them pulsed with possibilities never considered, images of Kokobeel's power directed toward protection rather than destruction, his ancient wisdom shared rather than weaponized. His existence integrated into the world rather than set against it. For one breathtaking moment, genuine consideration crossed Kokobeel's face, the first truly new thought in centuries penetrating calcified conviction. The sacred gear's connection had reached deeper than expected, illuminating potential for change where even Naruto had doubted it existed. Then reality reasserted itself with violent suddenness. The cathedral doors burst open as reinforcements arrived, devil guards dispatched by Seersex, exorcists sent by the church, even a contingent of fallen angels under Azazel's authority. The three factions had responded to the threat independently but simultaneously. The interruption shattered the delicate connection. Kokobeel's expression hardened once more, ancient defense. Reimposing themselves with the instinct of self-preservation. But something had changed, a seed planted that couldn't be instantly uprooted. "This isn't finished," Kokobeel declared, though whether he meant the battle or the unexpected connection remained ambiguous. With a gesture, he created a transportation circle beneath himself. The newly arrived forces launched attacks to prevent his escape. But they passed through empty air as he vanished, taking none of the Excaliburs with him, a final indication that something had shifted in his intentions. In the aftermath, as healing magic was applied and explanations exchanged, Naruto found himself experiencing a different kind of exhaustion than physical combat produced. The sacred gear's connection with Kokobeel had demanded more than energy. It had required empathic understanding of pain so ancient and vast it defied human comprehension. Rias found him sitting alone amid the cathedral rubble, staring at nothing as he processed the experience. "You reached him," she said softly. Not a question but recognition. "Not enough to change his course completely," Naruto replied. "But enough to plant a seed of doubt. Whether it grows or withers depends on him now." "That's more than anyone has achieved with Kokobeel in millennia," Rias observed, settling beside him. "The fact that he retreated without the Excaliburs instead of fighting to the end is unprecedented." The others joined them gradually, Akeno still crackling with residual holy lightning, Xenovia carrying the recovered Excalibur fragments with reverent care, Asia tending final injuries among their allies. The battle had been won, the immediate crisis averted, but all sensed the encounter represented something more significant than tactical victory. "Your sacred gear," Xenovia said, addressing Naruto with new respect. "It's more powerful than I anticipated. And more profound." "It's still just illumination," Naruto explained wearily. "I can't force anyone to change. NLY help them see possibilities they've been denying. Sometimes that's the most powerful magic of all," Akeno observed, her gentle tone contrasting with the fearsome power she displayed in battle. "Seeing oneself clearly after centuries of denial." As the initial crisis response transitioned to recovery operations, representatives of the three factions maintained careful separation while coordinating necessary actions. Ancient mistrust couldn't be erased in a day, but the shared victory against Kokobeel's plot had created temporary alignment that hinted at greater possibilities. Xenovia approached Naruto as he helped clear debris from what had once been the cathedral altar. Her expression carried unusual uncertainty, her customary martial confidence tempered by new considerations. "The church will want a full report on your abilities," she stated. "They'll likely request your presence for examination and documentation." "I'm still under Grimoire protection," Naruto reminded her. I make my own decisions about who examines what." To his surprise, Xenovia nodded acceptance rather than arguing. "That's reasonable. After witnessing your sacred gear's true nature, I believe it would be inappropriate to subject it to institutional analysis." The admission represented significant evolution in her thinking, prioritizing right action over institutional procedure, a major depart. "You're for someone whose identity had been defined by absolute adherence to church doctrine. You're changing too," Naruto observed with a small smile. "Your influence has been illuminating," she acknowledged, discomfort with emotional honesty evident in her stiff posture. "I've begun questioning assumptions I previously accepted without examination." "That's how growth happens," Naruto replied. Quote, "Questioning doesn't mean abandoning faith, just ensuring it's truly yours rather than inherited without thought." Xenovia considered this, then nodded decisively. "I would like to continue our discussions, if you're amenable. There is much about your perspective that challenges and clarifies my understanding." The request, formal in phrasing but vulnerable in intent, represented a bridge between worldviews that had initially seemed incompatible. Naruto recognized the courage such openness required from someone as doctrinally rigid as Xenovia had been. "I'd like that," he agreed sincerely. The week following Kokobeel's retreat brought significant developments across multiple fronts. The incident's severity had forced unprecedented cooperation between factions, with representatives establishing temporary protocols to prevent similar threats in the future. For Naruto personally, the aftermath created both challenges and opportunities. Word of his sacred gear's effectiveness against a being of Kokobeel's caliber spread rapidly through supernatural circles, intensifying interest from all factions. The Valaks renewed their diplomatic overtures with increased urgency, while Church authorities sent formal requests for consultation that carefully avoided demanding compliance. More significantly, the experience had prompted deep reflection about his power's nature and ethical implications. If his sacred gear could influence beings as ancient and powerful as Kokobeel, what responsibility came with such ability? Where was the line between illuminating potential choices and manipulating outcomes? However benevolently intended, these questions occupied his thoughts as he sat alone on the school rooftop during lunch period, watching clouds drift across the sky in patterns that reminded him poignantly of Shikamaru's favorite pastime. Contemplating cosmic questions, came Akeno's melodious voice as she approached, carrying 2 bento boxes. "Something like that," Naruto admitted, accepting the lunch with grateful smile, trying to figure out the limits of this power, and whether I should even be using it at all. Akeno settled beside him with characteristic grace. "Having doubts after your encounter with Kokobeel?" "Not doubts exactly," Naruto clarified, organizing his thoughts. "More like concerns about influence versus free will. If my sacred gear can affect someone's perception so profoundly, am I really giving them choice, or just a more subtle form of manipulation?" It was the question that had haunted him since the battle, especially when he considered his deepening relationships with Rias, Akeno, and now potentially Xenovia. Had his sacred gear created genuine connections, or merely the illusion of authentic feeling? "May I offer an observation?" Akeno asked, her usual playfulness replaced with thoughtful sincerity. At Naruto's nod, she continued, "Your sacred gear illuminates what already exists within a person: potential connections, unrealized truths, choices available but unseen. It doesn't create what isn't there or override genuine will. But how can we be sure?" Naruto pressed. "With Kokobeel, with the exorcists, he hesitated, then finished honestly, with you and Rias. How can I know the feelings are real and not just supernatural influence?" Understanding dawned in Akeno's violet eyes. "Ah, you're worried our feelings toward you might be artificial, created by your sacred gear rather than genuine attraction and connection." Put so directly, the concern sounded almost self-centered, but Akeno's expression held no judgment. Only compassionate recognition of his ethical dilemma. "The simplest answer," she said after a thoughtful moment, "is that your sacred gear responds to truth, not creates it. When it activated between us, it didn't manufacture compatibility. It illuminated what was already there as potential. But accelerated and intensified by supernatural means, Naruto pointed out. Perhaps, Akeno acknowledged. But consider this. If someone shows you a path you hadn't noticed before, is your choice to walk it any less authentic? Illumination isn't coercion, Naruto. It's simply clarity. The perspective helped, though it didn't entirely resolve his concerns. Before he could respond, the rooftop door opened again to admit Rias, followed by Xenovia, whose presence at their school had become increasingly common since the Kokobile incident. "I thought we might find you here," Rias said, joining them. "Discussing the philosophical implications of divine gifts." "Something like that," Naruto confirmed with a slight smile. "Specifically whether my sacred gear undermines free will." "Ah." Rias nodded, understanding. The eternal question of influence versus autonomy. Particularly relevant given recent developments. Xenovia, who had been listening with intense focus, spoke up with characteristic directness. "If I may offer perspective from church theology, divine gifts by definition cannot violate free will, as that would contradict their fundamental purpose." "How so?" Naruto asked, genuinely curious about her theological framework. "Free will is the central pillar of divine design," Xenovia explained, settling into the discussion with surprising comfort given her previous rigidity. "Sacred gears may provide capabilities beyond normal human limits, but they cannot override the essential freedom of choice that defines humanity's relationship with the divine." "That's consistent with what we've observed," Rias agreed. "Your sacred gear reveals truths and possibilities, but the choice to accept or reject them remains with the individual. Kokobile could have embraced the understanding you offered. That he didn't entirely do so demonstrates that autonomy remained intact." The conversation continued, four perspectives examining the question from different angles: Naruto's ethical concerns, Akeno's emotional intelligence, Rias's strategic assessment, and Xenovia's theological framework. What emerged was not simple resolution but nuanced understanding that acknowledged both power and limitation, responsibility and respect for others' agency. As their lunch period ended and they prepared to return to classes, Rias placed a gentle hand on Naruto's arm. "There's something else we should discuss. The three of us have been talking, and we'd like to address your concerns more directly this evening." The slight hesitation, so unusual from the normally composed devil princess, combined with meaningful glances exchanged between the three women, suggested this would be no ordinary conversation. "All right," Naruto agreed, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "Where and when?" "The Occult Research Club, after school activities end," Rias specified. "Just the four of us, without interruption." Throughout the remainder of the school day, Naruto found himself distracted by speculation about the upcoming meeting. The coordinated approach from Rias, Akeno, and Xenovia suggested the wide-reached some shared conclusion about their complex situation, particularly the relationships developing between them all. When he arrived at the club room that evening, he found it transformed from its usual state. Candles provided warm lighting instead of the standard lamps, comfortable cushions had been arranged in a conversational circle, and a sense of intentional intimacy pervaded the space. Rias, Akeno, and Xenovia were already present, each positioned to form a natural fourth place for Naruto to complete their circle. Their expressions carried varying degrees of determination, from Rias's composed certainty to Akeno's serene confidence to Xenovia's slightly uncomfortable but resolute focus. "Welcome," Rias greeted him. "Thank you for joining us." "You've got me curious," Naruto admitted, taking the indicated seat. "What's this about?" "Your concerns about your sacred gear's influence on our feelings," Akeno stated directly, addressing the core issue without preamble. "We've discussed it extensively and decided the matter requires clear resolution. For all our sakes," Xenovia added with characteristic forthrightness. Naruto glanced between them, surprised by their coordinated approach to such a personal matter. "And you've reached some conclusion?" "We have," Rias confirmed. "But rather than simply telling you, we believe demonstration will be more convincing." "Demonstration of the authenticity of our feelings," Akeno clarified, a hint of her usual playfulness returning. "Independent of your sacred gear's influence." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want to prove your feelings are real, not created by my power." "Precisely," Xenovia nodded. "Through empirical evidence rather than mere assertion." The methodical approach seemed particularly characteristic of Xenovia, whose analytical mind approached even emotional matters with tactical precision. That she included herself in this demonstration indicated significant evolution in her previously rigid worldview. "And how exactly do you plan to demonstrate this?" Naruto asked, both curious and slightly apprehensive. Rias leaned forward, her expression serious. "We've created a temporary nullification field within this room, a combined effort of devil magic, holy power, and specialized barriers. Within this space, all sacred gear influences are suppressed completely." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. "You can do that. It's complex magic," Akeno acknowledged. "And temporary. But for the next hour, your sacred gear cannot activate within this room, regardless of emotional intensity or connection." "The perfect controlled experiment," Xenovia added with satisfaction. "If our feelings persist without supernatural influence, their authenticity is confirmed." The elaborate preparation demonstrated how seriously they'd taken his concerns, not dismissing them as insignificant but addressing them with respect and thoroughness. The consideration touched Naruto deeply, regardless of what the experiment might reveal. "I can feel the difference," he admitted, placing a hand over his chest where the familiar warmth of his sacred gear typically resided. "It's like a muted space where that connection used to be." "Exactly," Rias confirmed. "Now, within this neutral environment, we can speak with complete certainty that our words and feelings are entirely our own, uninfluenced by any external force." What followed was unlike any conversation Naruto had experienced, three extraordinary women from different backgrounds and traditions expressing with unflinching honesty how they had come to care for him. Each in their distinctive way. Rias spoke of initial strategic interest that had evolved into genuine admiration and eventually deeper attachment, how his straightforward nature and unwavering loyalty had revealed qualities she'd never found in Devil Society's political machinations. Akeno described resonance between wounded souls, recognition of someone who understood what it meant to contain power others feared, to integrate disparate aspects of identity into coherent wholeness. His acceptance of her dual nature had catalyzed healing she'd thought impossible. Most surprising was Xenovia, whose rigid worldview had initially rejected anything outside church doctrine. She spoke with military precision but undeniable sincerity about how his perspective had created space for questions she'd never permitted herself, how his respect for her faith while challenging its limitations had opened possibilities for authentic belief rather than blind adherence. Throughout their accounts, Naruto observed with growing amazement that without his sacred gear's influence, their feelings appeared not diminished but clarified, stripped of supernatural enhancement to reveal genuine connection that had developed through shared experience and mutual understanding. When they finished, silence settled over the circle, not uncomfortable but weighted with significance. The candles flickered, sawing warm light across faces that had revealed more vulnerability than their respective positions typically allowed. "I don't know what to say," Naruto finally admitted, humbled by their openness. "You don't need to say anything yet," Rias assured him. "This evening isn't about demanding response but providing clarity, removing doubt so whatever develops between us can do so without question of authenticity." "Though your thoughts would be welcome," Akeno added with gentle encouragement. Naruto took a deep breath, organizing emotions too complex for simple expression. "I came to this world completely lost, torn from everything and everyone I knew. Finding connection here seemed impossible, especially with beings so different from humans in my world." He looked between them, meeting each gaze directly. "But you all showed me that some things transcend dimensions: courage, loyalty, the struggle to define yourself beyond others' expectations. Those connections felt real to me from the beginning, sacred gear or not." As he spoke, he realized a fundamental truth about his power that he'd overlooked in his concern about influence. "Maybe my sacred gear doesn't create connections at all, maybe it just helps me find people who share something essential with me, something that would have drawn us together eventually regardless of circumstances." The insight resonated visibly with all three women, recognition dawning that perhaps the sacred gear was less cause than catalyst, not manufacturing compatibility but accelerating recognition of what already existed as potential. "That aligns with theological understanding of divine gifts," Xenovia observed thoughtfully. "They enhance natural qualities rather than imposing unnatural ones. And explains why it affected each of us differently, Akeno added. Illuminating distinct points of compatibility unique to each connection. Most importantly, Rias concluded, it places agency where it belongs, with us, not with supernatural influence. The connections were always possible. Your sacred gear simply helped us recognize them sooner. The perspective shift transformed what had been ethical concern into something approaching wonder, appreciation for a power that facilitated genuine understanding rather than manufacturing artificial attachment. The nullification field had demonstrated that without his sacred gear's illumination, the connections remained intact, different in expression perhaps, but authentic in essence. As their conversation continued, exploring implications and possibilities, the rigid formality of their arranged circle gradually relaxed. Positions shifted, distance decreased, comfort with proximity increased. Without conscious planning, they found themselves in a configuration that physically reflected their emotional alignment. Neither forced intimacy nor maintained separation, but natural gravitation toward shared center. The nullification field will dissipate soon, Rias eventually noted, glancing at an ornate timepiece on the wall. When it does, your sacred gear will likely activate in response to the connections we've been discussing. Are you ready for that? Akeno asked Naruto, for the illumination to return, knowing now what it truly represents. The question carried layers of meaning beyond the immediate moment, asking essentially if he accepted his power's nature and the responsibilities it entailed. Not just with them, but in all interactions where his unique ability might influence outcomes. I think I am, Naruto nodded, newfound clarity bringing confidence. Understanding it TTER makes it less something that happens to me and more something I can work with intentionally. As he spoke, the subtle shift in the room's energy indicated the nullification field beginning to dissolve. The familiar warmth rekindled in Naruto's chest, his sacred gear responding to the authentic connections that had been confirmed rather than questioned. The golden light manifested gradually, illuminating the four of them with gentle radiance. But unlike previous activations, this manifestation carried new qualities, more controlled, more intentional, responsive to Naruto's understanding rather than merely his emotions. When the light touched each woman, they gasped softly at the enhanced connection, not creating new feelings but amplifying genuine ones, bringing emotional truth into sharp focus without distorting its essential nature. It feels different, Xenovia observed with characteristic analytical precision. More integrated, because you're experiencing it with awareness rather than as unexpected influence. Rias suggested, conscious connection rather than subconscious reaction. Through the illuminated bonds, Naruto sensed each relationship's distinctive qualities. Ith unprecedented clarity, Rias's combination of strategic mind and compassionate heart, Akeno's integration of opposing heritages into harmonious strength, Xenovia's evolution from rigid doctrine to thoughtful faith. Each connection unique, each valuable in its own right, each authentic beyond question. More importantly, he recognized how these bonds had transformed him as well, helping him find place and purpose in a world not his own. Providing community when he'd expected isolation, offering belonging that transcended dimensional boundaries. What happens now? Xenovia asked with practical directness as the golden light gradually receded, leaving the connections it had illuminated vibrant but unenhanced. That, Rias answered with a small smile, is entirely for us to decide, without predetermined structure or external expectation. As equals creating our own path, Akeno added, the sentiment reflecting her journey from defined roles to authentic self-expression. Naruto looked between, and these three extraordinary women who had, each in their unique way, helped him find belonging in a world he'd never expected to call home. The path ahead remained undefined, relationships still evolving. But the foundation had been established beyond doubt, connections based on genuine understanding rather than supernatural manipulation. Whatever comes next, he said with quiet certainty, we face it together. That much I know for sure. The simple declaration resonated deeply with all present, a commitment not to specific outcome but to shared journey, to connections that would continue developing naturally. Illuminated but not determined by his unique power. Outside the club room windows, night had fallen over Kuo Town, stars emerging in patterns unfamiliar to Naruto's original world yet increasingly meaningful in this one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, political maneuvering from the Valaks, continued interest from church authorities, potential repercussions from Kokobeel's retreat rather than defeat. But those concerns belong to tomorrow. Tonight had established something more fundamental, confirmation that the connections forming between these four distinct beings transcended supernatural influence to touch something essential in each of them. Understanding that would carry forward regardless of what challenges arose. As candles burned lower and conversation shifted to lighter topics, the atmosphere maintained the intimacy of shared revelation while relaxing into comfortable companionship. Four individuals from wildly different origins, finding in each other perspectives and qualities that complemented their own, illuminated by a power whose true nature they were only beginning to comprehend. In the endless expanse between dimensions, where Naruto had once been torn from his native world and deposited in this new reality, something fundamental had shifted. What had begun as disorientation and loss had transformed through connection into belonging and purpose. Roots taking hold in soil he'd never expected to call his own. His sacred gear, the divine conviction that enhanced his natural ability to reach hearts across boundaries, had found its truest expression not in battle against cosmic enemies but in the authentic bonds forming between souls who recognized in each other something essential and true. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, that foundation would remain, illuminated by golden light when activated, but existing independent of supernatural enhancement. Genuine connections between hearts that had found in each other something worth believing in. Chapter 3 End.